If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 211 The Surface World's Condition. Another legendary Pokémon encounter. At that moment, Old Smoker's eyes lit up when he spotted Kairos, and he immediately started forward to speak. But Kairos raised his hand to stop him. He already knew what the old man was going to say. Hold on. We'll talk about the candy situation in a minute. He quickly walked over to Alara, checking her injuries first. After confirming she wasn't in any life-threatening danger, he let out a relieved breath. Then he turned to face all the Core Watchers members who had gathered, still visibly shaken, and announced, "Everyone, I found that fragment, and I've deciphered what it says." The statement hit like a bombshell, immediately causing a stir. Deciphered it? The ancient record that generations of Watchers had failed to crack had actually been decoded by this young man in such a short time? Kairos didn't waste time with long explanations. He simply recounted the historical truth recorded in the fragment. From Ho-Oh's sacrifice to repel the Ultra Beasts, to humanity's initial reverence, then to their later shift toward unchecked technological expansion driven by fear and ambition, ultimately leading to ecological collapse and forcing them underground. The truth about the surface world finally laid itself bare before everyone through Kairos's account. The base fell into dead silence. Every face showed shock. Especially when they heard about humanity's series of self-destructive actions after Ho-Oh's sacrifice, many people's expressions turned grim. They truly hadn't expected the surface world's destruction to have such a cause. However, when Kairos finally shared his conclusion that after 500 years of natural recovery without human interference, the surface world had very likely regained much of its habitability, an unprecedented gleam ignited in everyone's eyes. As long as they could return to the surface, break free from the Alliance's control, and escape this miserable underground existence, nothing else mattered. After Kairos finished speaking, the room remained silent for a full minute as everyone processed this earth-shattering revelation. But there were plenty of sharp minds present too. As the massive shock of the historical truth gradually faded, an extremely practical and heavy question settled over each watcher's mind like a storm cloud. 500 years was indeed long enough to erase and transform everything. That surface, forgotten for centuries, what would it actually look like now? After all, everything about the surface world's current state was still just speculation. Meanwhile, Alara, supported by Akshuan, forced herself to stand upright. Physical pain caused cold sweat to bead on her forehead, but her eyes were unusually sharp, clearly in an excited mental state. She looked at Kairos, her voice urgent as she spoke. "The truth you've brought is incredible. Ho-Oh's sacrifice, the reason for the surface world's collapse." She looked around, her gaze sweeping over the confused faces as she solemnly addressed everyone. "So there's only one question left: can we really go back now? After 500 years, what exactly has the surface environment become? And those monsters, where are they now?" Everyone nodded in agreement. No one knew whether the air that humans needed to survive had recovered its purity on the surface, whether water sources and other resources had been contaminated by residual energy. And those monsters that destroyed the original world, would they come back? Or were they waiting on the surface right now for humanity's return? Not monsters. They're called Ultra Beasts. Kairos corrected her. "Right, Ultra Beasts. Got it." Alara nodded. The atmosphere grew heavy. No one made a sound as they all seemed to mull over the earlier questions. However, at that moment, Kairos noticed something. The edge of the metal fragment in his hand seemed to flash with a glimmer of light under the dim yellow illumination. His curiosity stirred. He touched the bottom corner with his fingertip and indeed discovered something unusual. Applying slight pressure with his finger, accompanied by a soft click, a thin disguise layer peeled away. Underneath was hidden a soft, dark gold card edged with complex patterns resembling star charts. "What's this?" Kairos held the card up to examine it. Old Smoker, who had been leaning against the wall smoking silently, squinted and stepped closer. He stared at the card for a few seconds, his hand holding the cigarette trembling slightly, his raspy voice shaking. "It's that key. I never thought the emergency passage from the old stories would actually be real." "What key?" Kairos realized this thing seemed to be crucial and immediately pressed for details. "Long story short, it's a passage not under Alliance control that leads to the surface world. But opening it requires a key. I once tried to track down information about this key, never expected it would turn up here." Old Smoker briefly explained the key's significance. "I came across this secret by accident. Good thing it's useful today. The surrounding people's expressions shifted. A passage to the surface world? Didn't that mean they could go see what the surface world was actually like now? That said, there was still one problem. Who would risk going up? Who would be the scout? Simple enough. I'll go check it out. Kairos shrugged. The rest of you should stay here. Wait for me. I'll go alone. Smaller target, easier to bail if things go south. If the situation above is bad, better to lose just me than risk everyone together. Ilara looked at Kairos, then at the somewhat hesitant companions around her, knowing this was the most rational choice. She nodded through the pain. All right, we'll wait for your news. Be extremely careful. Before departing, Old Smoker silently walked over and pressed a palm-sized black metal device with glowing blue indicator lights into Kairos's hand. High-performance environmental recorder, he explained. Record what it's really like up there, measure everything. We need to see it with our own eyes. I'll use this recorder's transmission system to guide you to the passage location. Wait for my signal. All right, I'm heading out. Kairos nodded, pocketed the recorder, patted Akshuan's shoulder, and turned to leave. Soon, following Old Smoker's directions, he found a dark entrance to an abandoned pipeline. He opened the cover and slipped inside. The journey through the passage was long and claustrophobic. The ground beneath his feet was slippery and the air stale. Fortunately, after walking for a while, a trace of unusual light finally appeared ahead. And blocking his path was an iron door dozens of meters high. Kairos stopped before that massive circular sealed gate. Centuries of rust and humid conditions made this door, forged from special alloy, look extraordinarily ancient. Many vines had burrowed into the metal's crevices, almost merging with the door itself. The door had no visible keyhole or control panel, only a vague outline of a groove covered in grime at its center. He took a deep breath and retrieved the dark gold card from his inner pocket, then wiped away the filth from the central groove, revealing equally complex and precise engravings beneath. Looks like a perfect match. Should work. As Kairos slowly brought the key close, the patterns on the card actually resonated faintly with the engravings in the groove, and the door began emitting low humming sounds. The moment the card was fully pressed into the groove. Click! A crisp sound rang out. Immediately after, with the key as the epicenter, streams of blue light seemed to come alive, instantly illuminating the hidden patterns inside the door and rapidly spreading outward, forming a vast stellar map. Hum! A deep vibration came from within the door as accumulated rust and dust continuously fell. The heavy gate didn't swing outward or inward but, accompanied by heavy and slow grinding, rotated and retracted into the wall, creating a gap large enough for passage. Kairos walked through the opening. The metal closed behind him. This was a continuously ascending passage with only stairs and nothing else. He climbed step by step. After what felt like forever, an opening appeared before him. And the moment he emerged from that opening, long-absent sunlight instantly pierced his eyes, making him instinctively squint. An unprecedented rush of fresh air, carrying the scent of damp earth, hit his nose so different from the stale underground air he was used to. The scene before him left even Kairos momentarily stunned. Towering trees formed a green canopy. Thick vines intertwined among them, completely devouring any trace of the old civilization. Insect chirps, bird calls, and distant wild Pokémon roars wove together into a thoroughly wild symphony. No humans. This was a world completely dominated by primitive life. Kairos quickly hid in a giant tree's shadow and carefully observed his surroundings. In a forest clearing, a wardeer with massive bronze-colored antlers walked leisurely past. An ancient species? Its stride was steady, and the energy waves radiating from it far exceeded any Pokémon he'd encountered underground. Kairos estimated it was at least gym leader level. Further away, a group of great tusks covered in rock-like shells rolled and played in a mud pit. The largest one at the front, merely by occasionally raising its head to survey the surroundings, radiated authority and pressure. All ancient species. That one should be quasi-elite level. The strength of Pokémon here. Kairos felt a stir of surprise. This land hadn't just recovered, it had given birth to more powerful Pokémon closer to their primitive forms, the ancient Pokémon. If the humans from the world below came here en masse, they'd probably be treated as invaders. He carefully took out the recorder and began documenting everything, the vast blue sky, the endless forest, these impressively powerful natives. These images would likely shock everyone in the underground world. Just as he was fully focused on recording a group of combi gathering honey, the sky's light suddenly darkened. A terrifying presence that made his soul tremble descended without warning from above. The surrounding air became scorching, emitting faint crackling sounds. The forest's clamor instantly died. All Pokémon, whether the powerful Great Tusk or the group of Wardeer, instantly froze and dropped to the ground, not daring to make a sound. Kairos instinctively looked up and saw a massive beast resembling a combination of saber-toothed tiger and stegosaurus, slowly appearing in a nearby clearing, its body displaying blazing flame patterns. Visible heat waves surrounded it. Its molten gold pupils carried an ancient, dignified aura and locked precisely onto the direction where Kairos was hiding. Gouging fire. Kairos recognized this Pokémon immediately. This was Entei's ancient form. His hand instantly pressed against the rainbow feather in his pocket, while Gengar in his shadow transmitted an extremely tense emotional response. Facing a legendary existence like this, such caution was obviously warranted. Kairos wasn't particularly afraid, though. After all, he had the feather as his ace in the hole. He was just somewhat surprised to encounter another legendary Pokémon right after arriving. However, the anticipated attack never came. Gouging fire only tilted its majestic head, its gaze sweeping over Kairos, seeming to pause slightly when it sensed the rainbow feather's faint energy from that particular pocket. A strange light flashed in its eyes, like curiosity, or perhaps, recognition? It let out a deep, resonant roar that shook the ground. This sound didn't seem like the prelude to an attack but more like a warning or perhaps an inquiry. It stared at Kairos for a few more seconds, then seemed to lose interest in investigating further. Its massive body bounded away, quickly disappearing into the distant undergrowth. That suffocating presence receded like a tide. Time in this forest seemed to pause for a moment before the sounds resumed. Kairos leaned against the tree trunk, his expression thoughtful. This gouging fire was indeed a legendary Pokémon, but its strength wasn't as overwhelming as he'd imagined. It was probably on par with Regirock, or perhaps even slightly weaker. The current question, though, was that it had discovered him but hadn't attacked. Was this because the Ho-Oh feather's aura had some calming effect? Or did it simply not have absolute hostility toward humans? Both possibilities existed. After all, Ho-Oh was Entei's creator, and gouging fire was Entei's ancient form. There had to be some connection between them. But judging from gouging fire's reaction, there was no way to confirm whether it had actually sensed the feather. However, one individual's attitude certainly didn't represent the entire ancient species population, let alone all the other powerful Pokémon on this land. If so many humans from the underground world returned to the surface all at once, it would inevitably disrupt the ecological balance here and might even be viewed as an invasion by the ancient species. If that were really the case, things could get messy. Whatever. Regardless, he'd gotten a general sense of the surface world's condition. If Pokémon could survive here, humans should have no problem either. That was already enough to report back. Kairos confirmed that the device on his chest was operating normally, then prepared to return the way he came. But at that moment, a book suddenly materialized before his eyes. The legendary Pokémon Encyclopedia. Chapter 212 The plan to contact Entei, but wait, where did these paradox Pokémon come from? Kairos frowned. Why had this thing appeared now? But then it hit him he'd gotten so caught up in the surface world that he'd completely overlooked one critical detail. A strange ripple spread from the pocket dimension in his inventory. The legendary Pokémon Encyclopedia, with its cold metallic cover and ancient runic engravings, somehow broke free from its invisible constraints and emerged from the system space on its own. It floated right in front of him, about an arm's length away. The pages began turning automatically, releasing a soft hum as gentle, mysterious light streamed from between them. The system's cold notification chimed directly in his mind. Record chapter has been updated. Host detected to have engaged in close-range energy-level interaction with legendary tier entity, codename, Raging Flames, ancient species. Legendary Pokémon Encyclopedia has recorded its basic name and initial impression. Kairos reached out and grabbed the floating encyclopedia. Still as heavy as ever. He opened the cover. The first page still showed Mewtwo's shadowy silhouette with its shackle-like outline and the impression marked as Vigilant Hostility. Kairos quickly flipped past it. Mewtwo, buddy, when I get back, I'm finding a way to improve your opinion of me. On the next page, a dynamic image of light and shadow appeared, a saber-toothed tiger form with burning flame patterns along its dorsal spines. Raging Flames. Below it, several lines of glowing text appeared. Legendary name, Raging Flames, Ancient form of Entei. Status, patrolling territory. Initial impression, majestic and proud, suspicious of humans. Special mark, brief energy resonance with Ho-Oh's relic. Kairos paused at that last line. So the creature had reacted to the sacred ash feather. Which meant the legendary Pokémon Encyclopedia's target had basically walked right up to him. Entei hadn't shown any interest in him, true, but at least it hadn't attacked either. And just as he'd suspected, the sacred ash feather clearly had some effect on it. If he could establish a real connection, even just initial goodwill, wouldn't that mean he could add another entry to the contract chapter's progress? The more Kairos thought about it, the more sense it made. This opportunity had practically fallen into his lap. He placed his hand on the floating encyclopedia and, based on previous experience, began communicating with it mentally. Query information on raging flames. Current precise location, temperament, preferences. Pursuit chapter activated. Query target, raging flames. Emotion points required, 5,000 points. Due to its special ancient legendary form and highly active fluctuating state. The system notification remained steady. 5,000 points? Kairos nearly stumbled when he saw that number. He'd already noticed the thing was charging outrageous fees, and now the costs were getting ridiculous. Did even a secondary legendary require this much? Whatever. He'd pay it. After all, unlocking a slot in the legendary Pokémon Encyclopedia was completely worth 5,000 emotion points. As the points were deducted, light patterns rippled across the pages like water, and new information appeared before him. Precise coordinates, southeast direction, approximately 15 kilometers, Scorching Valley core area, large lava landform volcanic crater basin. Temperament, extremely territorial, aloof personality. Keynote, dislikes chaotic metallic clanging and unnatural energy pollution. Preference, enjoys consuming molten fire crystals and items containing pure earth life energy. Recent behavior pattern, wandering leisurely. After reviewing the information, Kairos's first reaction was confusion. Dislikes metallic clanging and unnatural energy pollution? Where would something like that even come from in this newly awakened surface world? But it likes fire-type items? How convenient. He happened to have a few pieces of A-grade fire-type resource called Scorching Core Fragments in his backpack, obtained from player reward draws. The quality was too high to just hand out, so he'd kept them. Who knew they'd actually come in handy now? For a legendary Pokémon, this quality should be good enough. As for items containing earth life energy, he didn't have anything ready-made that matched, but there was one berry that might work. A fruit with a green body covered in spiral patterns appeared in Kairos's hand. The berry gave off a fresh earthy scent. It was called a pomegg berry, not a nut, but a special berry infused with ground-type energy, also obtained from previous draws. Everything was set. Kairos weighed the scorching core fragment radiating intense heat in his left hand and the pomegg berry in his right, then glanced at the system-provided map. The target was in the lava basin core, 15 kilometers southeast. Time to move. After confirming the environmental recorder on his chest showed a steady green light, he stored the legendary Pokémon Encyclopedia back in the system space and spoke to the faintly shifting shadow at his feet. The surface world's more dangerous than I expected. If things go south, I'm counting on you. He adjusted his direction, chose a relatively hidden route, and began moving quickly toward the southeast. As Kairos ventured deeper into the forest, the ground beneath his feet gradually grew hot and soft, while the sulfurous smell in the air intensified. Giant ferns replaced the towering ancient trees, their leaf edges bizarrely burning with faint blue flames. Definitely not normal. Sunlight penetrated the water vapor above, casting columns of light through the woods. The ground began showing small holes releasing scalding steam and lava veins winding like spider webs. He wasn't far from where raging flames was staying. The volcanic crater's ecology had clearly influenced the surrounding terrain. Kairos's senses sharpened. The dangerous presence in this area had grown much denser. From nearby came the faint, rumbling roars of a mammoth swine herd and the tremors of their movement. They seemed to be guarding the edge of that strange glowing mushroom forest. Another even more hostile gaze, filled with intense malice, had briefly locked onto him before retreating into the forest depths. Based on the silhouette he'd glimpsed, that was very likely Roaring Moon's territory. Relying on his enhanced agility and environmental awareness, Kairos constantly adjusted his route, precisely avoiding areas radiating strong keep-out warnings. Jengar stayed in his shadow the entire time, even using its power to help conceal Kairos's presence. This way, those dangerous ancient species Pokémon wouldn't register him as a threat. Honestly, this kind of travel was exhausting, but the results were clear. Kairos made it nearly 10 kilometers deeper with close calls but no real danger. The surface temperature had risen noticeably, and even the air became scorching. Breathing it in brought a stinging sensation. Kairos checked to confirm the camera on his chest was accurately recording surface conditions, then continued forward. When he passed through a sparse area of low shrubs, a region filled with strange, sharp blue crystals suddenly appeared ahead. The area looked out of place and immediately caught his attention. The instant his foot touched the edge of this area, a blazing, blindingly bright metallic beam shot toward him from the side without warning. Incredibly fast. He reacted immediately. Without needing a prompt, the shadow at his feet surged upward. A shadow ball condensed with deep, dark energy formed instantly and slammed hard toward the beam. Boom! A violent energy explosion erupted. Intense light and smoke burst outward. The attacker's form revealed itself after the blast. Iron Hands. The future form of Hariyama. Its entire body was covered in cold, silver-gray alloy muscle. Its eyes no longer held the spark of a living creature but instead flashed with cold, emotionless red light. A paradox Pokémon. Kairos's eyes widened slightly. A flash of surprise crossed his mind. Wasn't this world supposed to only have ancient species? The current situation didn't allow much time for thinking. This thing was strong. Gengar had used 80% of its power in that interception. The opponent's strength had probably reached Elite 4 level. Iron Hands, having missed with one strike, seemed to assess the situation. It emitted a dull sound like grinding metal. Its alloy muscles in both arms bulged as it prepared to charge again. But before Iron Hands could launch its second attack, and just as Kairos was preparing to command Gengar, dense energy reactions suddenly erupted from all directions in the distance, closing in from different positions at alarming speed. The sky was obscured by a massive shadow swooping in at high velocity. It looked like a moving blade tank, with blue propulsion flames jetting from gaps in its complex alloy structure, bringing a low, oppressive roar. Iron Jugulies. On the ground, amid strange mechanical humming, large amounts of metallic dust glowing with an ominous green light spread like living things, carrying an intense corrosive presence. The source was a strange moth-like creature with wings shaped like shattered circuit boards, crackling with electric sparks. Iron Moth. From the flank, a silver light so fast it was nearly blurred tore through the air, stabbing straight at him. Two constantly vibrating energy blades radiated an intense aura of spatial cutting. Iron Valiant. And that wasn't all. From deeper in the woods, more blurry shadows radiating cold metallic luster and dangerous energy were rapidly converging. Their numbers were unclear, but they formed a tight encirclement. Each individual's aura was at least peak gym leader level. Several that appeared to be leaders had even reached Elite 4 level. The pure, unnatural hostility emanating from them surged like a wave, devoid of any emotional fluctuation. Even more chilling was that they seemed to share some invisible link. Some kind of cold operational command was being transmitted silently. The entire encirclement closed in like a precision hunting machine, and Kairos was the prey. Gengar's form flickered rapidly between shadow and air, blocking the occasional stray attacks from all directions, but the pressure was obviously immense. And what was even more critical, if they kept fighting here, the number of these paradox Pokémon would only increase. Gengar's strength wouldn't be able to handle it. Kairos was only a few kilometers from the core lava area of Scorching Valley. He could already feel the powerful energy belonging to Raging Flames. But blocking his path was a group of well-trained, formidably strong, perfectly coordinated paradox Pokémon whose numbers were still increasing. Kairos immediately began his assessment. Iron Jugulies was blocking the sky. Even if Gengar carried him up, it wouldn't work. Forcing his way through would probably consume the Ho-Oh feather completely. If he then encountered that aloof, territorial Raging Flames without the feather's protection, he'd be in danger too. Plus, his original goal of establishing friendly contact would be ruined. In that brief moment, Kairos made his decision. Under these circumstances, retreating was the best option. After all, he'd already paid the legendary Pokémon Encyclopedia's points. He could take his time planning the next move. With his mind made up, there was no hesitation. Kairos glanced at Iron Valiant still closing in, its twin blades gleaming with cold light. Then he looked at Iron Jugulies hovering in the sky like a fortress, continuously applying force field pressure. Finally, his gaze swept over Iron Moth on the ground, continuously spreading toxic metallic dust. He memorized their positions and gave Gengar a direct nod. Get me out of here. The perfect moment to use a ghost-type Pokémon's abilities. The moment his words fell, the shadow at his feet surged with Gengar inside it, expanding and swirling like a giant black maw that swallowed him whole, leaving only a trail of black smoke slowly dissipating in place. At almost the same instant, several energy beams, corrosive liquid, and Iron Valiant's slashing attack crashed down hard on the position where he'd just been standing. Boom! Violent explosion smoke billowed upward. Shattered rocks flew everywhere. When the smoke cleared, only a large crater remained. No trace of Kairos at all. The Paradox Pokémon army that had surrounded him all visibly froze. These Pokémon's command systems seemed to experience a brief judgment delay. Iron Jugulise's cold electronic eyes rapidly scanned the residual energy traces. Iron Valiant's form remained frozen in its post-attack posture, hovering quietly in place. Its twin blades hung slightly down, and the eyes beneath its mask glowed red, as if performing deeper calculations. Only the low mechanical hum and the sound of metallic dust spreading remained in the air. For a moment, there was no other movement. Meanwhile, 50 meters away, a shadow rapidly surged up from the ground. Kairos reappeared on the surface, breathing a slight sigh of relief. "Whew! Made it out." Chapter 213 New Mysteries and Plans. Once Kairos confirmed he was safely out of danger, the tension finally drained from his body. Honestly, the speed and precision of that Paradox Pokémon ambush had caught him completely off guard. He even suspected someone might be controlling them from behind the scenes, otherwise, how could they coordinate that well? Gengar emerged from his shadow, looking unusually dull. His purple glow seemed faded, and his usual mischievous grin was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he looked thoroughly rattled, stubby arms crossed over his chest. That narrow escape had clearly shaken him. "Gengar, Gengar!" He muttered something, and Kairos got the gist. "That was way too close. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to carry a full-grown human while phasing through shadows? Thank God those things didn't have any abilities to mess with my incorporeal form, or we'd be toast." Kairos raised an eyebrow, thinking back to what had just happened. His original plan had been to have Gengar cause a distraction while he forced his way through using his enhanced body. But when things went sideways, Gengar had pulled him straight into the deeper shadow realm and teleported them both out in one move. This ability to carry living beings through short-range shadow jumps was something Kairos had never seen Gengar pull off before, or at least, he hadn't realized it was possible. Apparently this guy had a real gift for shadow manipulation. An unexpected bonus. Once they got back and things settled down, he'd need to train and develop that ability further. "Good work." Kairos patted Gengar's round head. "Quick thinking. You really pulled through back there." Gengar shook his head, seeming to perk up a bit. He floated up to Kairos's face, red eyes full of confusion. "Kikik. If we could slip away that easily, why didn't we just keep going? That really powerful thing, wasn't that what you were looking for? I could feel it just ahead, not even that far." At the question, Kairos shook his head, his gaze sweeping across the area covered in strange blue crystals and the faint metallic hum coming from deeper within. "Couldn't risk it. The closer we get to the center, the more Paradox Pokémon there are. The density goes up significantly. And they're way too coordinated. What we just faced was probably only a fraction of what's out there. If we'd kept pushing forward, the risk would have been too high. If we got completely surrounded, I might have found a way out, but it would have cost me." He paused. "I'm glad I brought you instead of Chandelure. I don't think he could have pulled me along like you did. We would have had to fight our way out." Gengar looked completely lost during the first part of Kairos's explanation. "Paradox Pokémon? What the hell is that? Wait, those were Pokémon?" He'd thought they were some kind of mechanical creatures. That's when Kairos realized that unlike him, Gengar had no clue what Paradox Pokémon were. After a moment's thought, he gave a simple explanation. "Listen up. They're called Paradox Pokémon. Basically, they're what regular Pokémon might evolve into in the distant future from a different timeline than ours. For example, that one with the blade arms that was crazy fast? That's actually the future form of Gardevoir, called Iron Valiant. When we make games later, we might include these forms too." Gengar responded reflexively, then froze solid, staring at Kairos in disbelief. They'd just barely escaped with their lives, nearly got shredded by those metal lunatics, and you're already thinking about putting them in future games? Talk about dedicated. Ignoring Jengar's reaction, Kairos leaned against the trunk of a massive fern-like tree and started processing everything that had just happened. He'd definitely been too hasty. Seeing the legendary Pokédex prompt and having the right items on hand, he'd wanted to strike while the iron was hot and approach gouging fire, completely overlooking other potential threats in the area. He'd almost wasted the life-saving Ho-Oh feather for nothing. Thankfully, things worked out. If he'd brought Chandelure instead, the raw combat power might have been slightly higher, but without that emergency escape option, things could have gone very wrong. Jengar had really come through. He deserved some serious rewards when they got back. But, as he surveyed this primitive yet dangerous landscape, several critical questions formed in his mind. First, where exactly did these paradox Pokémon come from? Earlier, when he'd seen the Pokédex note that gouging fire detests chaotic metallic sounds and unnatural energy, he'd found it strange. Where would those things come from on the surface? Now it made sense. What gouging fire hated was precisely the metallic noise and unnatural aura these paradox Pokémon gave off. Ancient and future paradoxes weren't exactly natural allies to begin with. Second, the ancient paradox's presence was more complicated than he'd thought. His earlier theory was that after 500 years without human interference, surface Pokémon had naturally evolved into stronger ancient forms. The logic seemed sound enough. But the future paradoxes threw that whole natural evolution theory out the window. If that was the case, the ancient paradoxes probably weren't as straightforward as he'd assumed either. No answer to that question yet. He'd need to dig deeper later. Kairos instinctively pulled up the system interface in his mind. Sure enough, the world background analysis progress bar had jumped from 33% to 55%. Discovering the surface's current state and encountering both ancient and future paradoxes confirming their existence had significantly advanced his understanding of this world. To push the analysis further, he'd probably need to figure out where the future paradoxes came from and the real reason behind the ancient paradox's appearance. Now, the third question, gouging fire. Thinking about it rationally, even if he'd managed to push through and deliver the Earth Core fragment and Oron berries, he would have only established the most basic connection at best. The legendary Pokédex's contract chapter quest required the legendary Pokémon to willingly play the game and give their approval. Out here in the middle of nowhere, facing a proud and solitary ancient Entei, without even having his phone, how was he supposed to get it to play a game? That requirement was impossible to fulfill in one shot. Establishing initial contact and laying groundwork for future interaction? That seemed doable. If he wanted to complete the legendary Pokédex quest later, he'd still need to solve this problem somehow. After working through these three issues, Kairos made his decision. The recorder was intact, and he'd documented the surface information. Priority 1 was getting this intel back to the Watcher's base. As for gouging fire, once things stabilized at the base and he was properly prepared, he could find another opportunity to make contact. Let's go, Jengar. We're heading back. Kairos made up his mind. Jengar. Jengar responded and melted back into his shadow, though this time the shadow seemed noticeably less animated than before. Clearly, after that ordeal, even Jengar was spooked. On the return trip to the underground passage entrance, Kairos was far more cautious than he'd been on the way out. With his enhanced senses and Jengar's help, he perfectly avoided several groups of ancient paradoxes. He didn't run into any more future paradoxes on the way back either. Finally, the hidden entrance disguised as a massive section of pipe appeared before him. As Kairos approached, his steps faltered. He noticed several unnatural footprints in the damp moss and rust around the entrance. Someone had tried to cover them up, but he still caught them. What made him pause even more was a device about the size of a fingernail, emitting an extremely faint red glow, wedged into an inconspicuous gap in the metal near the entrance's edge. Surveillance device. League. Kairos understood immediately. So the League already knew about his movements. Interesting. He reached out and pressed lightly on the device. The faint red light instantly died. A tiny click came from inside, then nothing. Only then did Kairos follow protocol, using the access key to open the entrance. His figure quickly disappeared into the darkness. The heavy gate closed silently behind him, cutting off the fresh, primitive air of the surface world. In its place came the underground passage's mix of machine oil, rust, and a faint musty smell. Kairos wrinkled his nose. The air quality down here was absolutely terrible. No wonder everyone in the underground wanted out. He immediately checked the environmental recorder strapped to his chest, confirming the indicator light showed steady green and the data was intact. Only then did he relax and quickly descend the metal grate stairs. 10 minutes later, when Kairos pushed open the heavy metal door of the Watcher's base, a thick atmosphere hit him like a physical force even heavier than the stale passage air. Dozens of people were gathered behind makeshift barricades in the bar area, but no one was talking. Only heavy breathing and the subtle sounds of weapons and equipment being handled broke the silence. The air was thick with tension and fear. Kairos picked up on it immediately, frowning. What happened while he was gone? Old Smoker and Ilara stood by a makeshift command post cobbled together from a salvaged control console, speaking in low, urgent tones. Both looked grim. Ilara's arm was wrapped in fresh bandages with faint bloodstains showing through. Her previous injuries clearly hadn't healed, instead, they'd gotten worse under continued strain. Anvil and some core members stood nearby, equally tense. Kairos. Akshuan spotted him first and rushed over, practically tackling his leg with a tight hug, face full of worry and relief. You're back. Thank God. That shout broke the silence. Everyone's eyes snapped to Kairos, filled with surprise and questions. Yeah, I'm back. Kairos patted Akshuan's head, gently prying him loose, then walked toward Ilara and Old Smoker. What's the situation here? Not good. Ilara's voice was rough with exhaustion. Shortly after you left, the League tightened the blockade. There are at least 3 times as many troops outside now, plus heavy weapon emplacements. They're waiting for us to run out of ammo and supplies, or... She didn't finish, but everyone knew what she meant. Old Smoker took a long drag on his pipe and exhaled a thick cloud of smoke. Bastards are really digging in. So, tell us, how was it up there? With that question, the room went silent. Every eye turned to Kairos. Clearly, this was what mattered most right now. Kairos didn't waste time. He pulled out the palm-sized environmental recorder. See for yourselves. He activated the playback, and a beam of light projected onto a relatively clean section of metal wall. Clear footage began to play. The vast blue sky with sunlight breaking through clouds in brilliant shafts. Endless primordial forests, towering canopy reaching toward the heavens. A leisurely walking wake with massive bronze antlers, and mighty great tusks rolling playfully in mud pits, radiating rock-solid presence. Sharp gasps filled the base. Blue sky. Forests. Powerful, never-before-seen Pokémon. Was this the surface world their ancestors once lived in? The world they'd only dreamed of? Then suddenly, the light in the footage dimmed dramatically. An invisible, overwhelming presence seemed to radiate through the image itself, making everyone watching feel their breath catch. They saw a massive beast with a body covered in flame-like patterns, a saber-toothed giant, gouging fire, rising to its full height. Its molten gold eyes carried ancient authority as it slowly emerged into the clearing. Just from the footage alone, the searing aura and primal pressure were enough to make everyone present, human and Pokémon alike, go weak in the knees. Kairos stopped the playback. He pressed the button, and the beam of light on the wall disappeared. He hadn't fully investigated the future paradoxes yet, so he wouldn't show that footage. No point giving them more to worry about, especially since in their current situation, they couldn't get out anyway. The entire base fell into stunned silence. Everyone's face showed shock, then the room erupted into overlapping voices. My God, there really is a blue sky. Just like in my dreams. Those Pokémon, so powerful, unbelievably strong. So, those are wild Pokémon up there? If we go to the surface, can we actually survive? Won't it just roast us alive? A young watcher voiced what most were thinking, his voice shaking. The power-gouging fire displayed far exceeded their understanding of what Pokémon were capable of. The fear it brought nearly overshadowed their longing to return to the surface. Seeing that everyone had more or less processed what they'd seen, Kairos spoke up, breaking the silence. You saw the environment. It really has recovered and can support human life. As for those Pokémon. He paused. Actually, the strongest one there didn't show any direct hostility toward humans, at least not toward me. So I believe humans returning to live on the surface is actually possible. Chapter 214, The True Meaning of Project Arc, Final Battle? Kairos's words were like sparks that instantly ignited the suppressed atmosphere of the base. The deathly silence shattered, replaced by heated debate. There's a chance? He said there's a chance. A young watcher's voice trembled as he stared at the wall where the image had disappeared, as if he could still see that patch of blue sky. A chance, my ass. Didn't you see the look in that thing's eyes? Sure, it didn't attack this guy, but us? We wouldn't even be enough to get stuck between its teeth. A scarred man slammed his fist against a metal crate with a loud clang, drawing plenty of attention. Scar's got a point, too strong, those Pokémon, they're nothing like the ones down here, someone murmured in agreement, their voice thick with fear. But, that's the surface. Blue sky. Forests. Better than being crushed like rats by the League in this hellhole, right? Someone countered, unable to suppress their longing. The guy said it himself, the key is how we get up there and how we coexist. Even if the risk is huge, isn't it worth taking the gamble? Gamble? Gamble with what? Our lives? We can't even hold this damn door anymore. Scar scoffed dismissively, pointing toward the entrance. Another dull explosion echoed from that direction, accompanied by cascading dust. At this moment, hope and fear intertwined on every face. The arguments grew louder, and the base filled with restless agitation. Some felt Kairos made sense, that the surface, however dangerous, was better than being wiped out by the League or dying trapped underground. But the risk was undeniably massive. The power of those ancient Pokémon exceeded anything they could have imagined. Others had been completely rattled by the roaring moon's oppressive presence and believed going up would be suicide. Amid the chaos, Old Smoker bit down on his pipe and quietly squeezed through to Kairos's side. His prosthetic arm, made of metal joints, nudged Kairos as he muttered in a low voice, "Hey, come with me. Over here." Kairos glanced at him and followed Old Smoker to a relatively quiet corner of the bar area, where several decommissioned server cabinets blocked most of the sight lines and noise. Old Smoker took a deep drag from his pipe, smoke swirling around him. He fixed his gaze on Kairos. Those eyes, usually lazy and indifferent, were now sharp, even tinged with longing. "Kairos," his voice was low and raspy, like metal scraping against metal. "First question, do you really think we have a shot at getting to the surface in our current state? Or are we just walking to our deaths?" As he spoke, he pointed upward. Kairos leaned against a nearby metal cabinet, his tone calm. "There's definitely a chance. If the environment's recovered and Pokémon can survive, then humans can too. As for the danger, you're in danger staying here anyway. The difference is, one's passively waiting to die, the other's actively fighting to live. As for ordinary people living up there, I'll be honest, it won't be easy." Old Smoker silently took another drag, his expression obscured by the curling smoke. After a few seconds, he exhaled a smoke ring and asked his second question, the one he really cared about most. "And earlier, that candy you gave me, where did you get it? Do you still have more?" His voice carried a barely suppressed urgency. One piece of candy had directly evolved his Murkrow into Honkroww, skyrocketing its strength to 4 stars. That kind of effect completely overturned his decades of understanding about Pokémon training and evolution. This wasn't something from the underground world, or even something the League from his memory could produce. It was this very item that confirmed to him that Kairos absolutely wasn't from this world. Kairos raised an eyebrow. He had a pretty good idea why the man had pulled him aside for a private chat. As for the system's items, he had no intention of keeping them secret. "They're mine." "What, you want more?" Old Smoker froze at Kairos's blunt answer, his fingers trembling slightly around his pipe. A flash of conflict crossed his face, as if debating whether to say something, like he was making some difficult decision. But just then, boom! An explosion, far more terrifying than any before, suddenly erupted from the direction of the base entrance. The entire base shook violently, like an earthquake. Half the overhead lights instantly went dark, flickering wildly. Cough cough. The main gate's been blown open. Anvil's hoarse roar came through the smoke and dust. Everyone immediately snapped to attention, forcing themselves to full alertness, preparing to fight. However, the anticipated scene of League forces flooding in like a tide didn't immediately happen. Through the lingering smoke, a voice amplified by a high-powered speaker echoed clearly into every corner of the base. "Survivors within the Watcher base, this is the commander of the League's Genesis Engine Garrison Forces, 4-star General Quinn." The instant that name was announced, the base fell silent once more. Even Illyra, who had been struggling to get up, froze completely, her face turning ashen. Anvil gasped and unconsciously took half a step back, his face filled with disbelief. Quinn, the Iron Blood Quinn? Isn't he in charge of Central District Security? Why would he personally come here? An older watcher's voice trembled. We're done, it's really him. I've seen his photo, his forces never leave survivors. Another voice was nearly sobbing. The voice from outside continued, cold and commanding. We have obtained, through special channels, intelligence that you possess information regarding the current state of the surface world and the existence of certain powerful creatures. Quinn's voice paused, as if carefully choosing his words. In truth, the League is not, as you believe, intent on imprisoning humanity underground forever. Returning to the surface and restoring humanity's glory is the League's ultimate goal. It's simply that the process is extraordinarily difficult. We must plan carefully and ensure absolute certainty before executing such a plan. His tone suddenly became earnest. Now, on behalf of the League's Supreme Council, I present you with an ultimatum. Lay down your weapons and surrender all information regarding surface conditions, Watcher Organization intelligence, and all data on the surface creatures you've discovered. Additionally, hand over the discoverer of this intelligence. In exchange, the League will grant amnesty for all past crimes of the Watcher Organization and allow you to become legitimate participants in the Genesis Engine project, sharing in the glory of returning to the surface. This is your final opportunity. Amnesty. Legal status. Participation in the surface return. These words hit like bullets, instantly striking those watchers teetering on the edge of despair. Especially those who had just been terrified by the League's overwhelming force and whose fear had been deepened by the Roaring Moon footage. Amnesty, legal, we can survive. A middle-aged man muttered, light flickering in his eyes. He was clearly wavering. And participate in returning to the surface? The League really would take us up. A young woman's voice carried hope. Better than getting killed right now, right? That's Quinn personally promising. Someone whispered in agreement. Bullshit. At that moment, Ilara's furious shout drowned out the wavering voices. Despite her injuries, she struggled to her feet, her face flushed red from both anger and blood loss. Don't believe their lies. What amnesty? What participants? They just want to monopolize the intelligence. Once we hand everything over and lose our value, we're dead. Their so-called Genesis engine, I'd bet anything it's not about bringing everyone to the surface. After all these years, I know the League best. Another high-ranking watcher emerged from a corner, his face dark. Ilara's right. You actually believe the League's promises? They won't even leave you scraps. Kairos stood in the shadows of the corner, silently watching the Watcher Organization split before his eyes. Some had shifting gazes, clearly tempted, quietly edging toward the entrance. Others gripped their weapons tightly, standing behind Ilara and Old Smoker with resolute expressions. Arguments erupted again, even more intense than before, filled with desperate choices about the future and distrust toward their comrades. The atmosphere in the base reached its breaking point. The fragile alliance could collapse from within at any moment. Kairos remained calm inside. Whatever the Watchers chose was their own business. He'd done what he should and could do. He'd given them the intelligence, pointed out the path. Whether they chose to grovel before the League, betting on the 1 in 10,000 chance of being treated as human, or chose to fight with everything they had and seize the opportunity to get out, that was up to them. Of course, if he put himself in their shoes, he would never trust the League's words. He'd always believed that only by firmly grasping your own destiny in your own hands did you truly have a chance. But he wasn't going to share this advice with these red-faced arguers now. After all, even if he did, they might not listen. Just as the internal arguments were about to escalate into infighting, Old Smoker, who had been silent all along, suddenly moved. He stepped forward and, in front of everyone, pulled something resembling a handgun from his coat. Bang! The loud noise grabbed everyone's attention. The next moment, he had already pulled something else from the inner pocket of his grimy leather jacket. It wasn't a weapon, but a palm-sized card made of special material. The card's edges had extremely fine gold threading, and its surface was covered with a matte coating. In the dim, flickering light, the card's center displayed an emblem of intricate lines resembling a ship's wheel combined with a shield, reflecting a cold gleam. Below the emblem was a line of small code and a name, Project Arc, Senior Engineer, Mason Hart. Old Smoker held this card high, ensuring every watcher could see it. The loose, carefree demeanor of the information broker completely vanished from his face, replaced by deep, burning anger. Everyone shut the hell up. Look carefully. His voice was still raspy, but it carried a power that pierced through to the heart. I'm not called Old Smoker. See this? Mason Hart. Senior engineer of the League's Project Arc core team. The base fell into instant silence. Everyone was stunned by this sudden revelation of identity. Even Ilera stared at him wide-eyed, clearly having had no idea about this twist. Project Arc, what's that? I know a little, supposedly the League's highest secret, but wasn't it abandoned long ago? Anvil's voice also carried shock. Abandoned? Mason Hart, or rather Old Smoker, let out a cold, mocking laugh. What absolute horseshit! Project Arc never stopped. Its core was never about leading humanity back to the surface. Its core is complete lockdown. Containment. Keeping all humans penned up like livestock in this sunless underground, then draining every last bit of value from us. Also the League's high and mighty lords can concentrate all resources to maintain their own wealth and privilege. He jabbed his finger outward, toward where Quinn's voice had come from, cursing. Their recent Genesis engine project, you know what it's really for? Hey! They say it's to benefit the underground world, but it's actually designed to completely drain the energy the surface world just recovered. For what? To strengthen their rule. To maintain the empire they've built in the underground world. They don't care if the surface becomes a dead zone again, and they don't care about our lives. He swept his gaze across the wavering faces and let out another cold laugh. Bring humanity back to the surface? Bah! Don't think I don't know what you're planning. Quinn. I know exactly what you Arc faction bastards are scheming. Hand over the intelligence? Then wait to be silenced? Dream on. Old Smokers know, Mason Hart's words exploded like thunder overhead. The League's promises were instantly torn open, revealing the cold, cruel truth beneath. Those who had been wavering saw the luck and hope drain from their faces like a receding tide, replaced by fury at being deceived. Damn, so that's how it is. Those League dogs. Absolute scum. Almost fell for their lies. Let's fight them. We're dead either way, might as well go out fighting. The division within the base vanished instantly. In this environment, humans were just that fickle. General Quinn outside had clearly heard Mason Hart's expose. His cold, amplified voice now carried a hint of anger. Stubborn fools. Since you choose destruction, then vanish completely. Attack. Leave no one alive. With his declaration. Rumble. The heavy sound of metal treads grinding against the ground echoed. At the base entrance, the blown open, twisted remains of the gate were completely smashed aside by overwhelming force. Through the billowing smoke, the first things to charge in were two heavy armored vehicles, like mobile fortresses. Their bodies were covered in thick armor plating, white high-pressure steam hissing from their joints. Close behind came an entire row of magnezone that had undergone energy amplification modifications. They were larger, with the magnetic levitation rings circling their bodies spinning at high speed, emitting a piercing hum. Powerful currents danced across their surfaces, radiating energy waves far more terrifying than the previous magnezone. Kairos could sense that every single magnezone's aura had firmly reached gym leader level. At the same time, a man wearing an immaculate dark blue general's uniform, 4 gleaming gold stars on his epaulets, slowly entered the base entrance surrounded by heavy forces. His features were cold and hard as stone. Just standing there, he emanated a suffocating sense of oppression. This must be General Quinn. And the moment Kairos saw his appearance, he couldn't help but pause slightly. This man. Why does he look somewhat familiar? Chapter 215. You're really just messing with me, aren't you? Roar. The heavily armored figures, impossible to identify as any recognizable Pokémon, let out deafening roars as massive steel claws slammed down. The Snorlax at the front line bellowed and threw itself forward, taking the hit head-on with its body. Boom! The Snorlax's enormous frame was forced back several steps, its thick layers of fat unable to fully absorb the sheer physical power. Deep gashes appeared across its body instantly, cutting down to the bone. ZZZT. Several bolts of terrifyingly powerful electricity burst from the amplified magnezone, crackling like frenzied electric serpents as they lashed viciously at Golem and several watchers trying to block them. Ah! Screams rang out as Golem's rocky shell cracked and splintered, electricity arcing across its surface. Even ground-type Pokémon, which should have been immune to electric attacks, couldn't withstand such overwhelming power due to the sheer gap in strength. The defensive line was as fragile as paper before these elite forces, torn open in an instant. Kairos! Look out! In that moment, Ilara suddenly screamed. A stray bolt from one of the amplified Magnezone's scattered attacks, like an out-of-control whip, swept directly toward Kairos, who was huddled in a corner clutching his backpack with Litwick's Pokeball inside. He was completely frozen in terror, staring blankly as the deadly blue-white light grew larger before his eyes. At the critical moment, Keek! A purple shadow shot out from the darkness at Kairos's feet like a ghost. Gengar! It opened its mouth, and a highly concentrated shadow ball formed instantly, slamming head-on into the stray electric current. Boom! The blast wave from the energy explosion sent Kairos flying, throwing him several meters into a pile of debris. He was covered in dust and grime, but at least he'd avoided the fatal strike. Litwick's Pokeball rolled out of his backpack. Gengar! Gengar positioned itself in front of Kairos, letting out a threatening hiss at the Magnezone before joining the battle. But now it had to deal with a heavy Aggron and several amplified Magnezone at once. Its purple body soon showed burn marks, clearly under immense pressure. Kairos watched the brutal, one-sided battle unfolding before him, his brow furrowing tightly. He'd really been hoping not to get completely dragged into this world's problems. But now, wasn't the League going way too far? Admiral Quinn was personally overseeing the operation, and the League had deployed truly elite heavy assault forces. They were clearly out to eliminate the entire Watcher organization. It was only a matter of time before the base fell, and Kairos had nearly been hit himself. Ilara and the others were just people he'd met by chance, but they had helped him out a bit, like providing intel on the old data port. Most importantly, these League people and their Genesis engine project wanted to completely drain the surface's energy. If they really finished draining it, the surface world would be gone. He wouldn't be able to complete his Pokédex with Rayquaza, and he couldn't explore this world anymore either. You're really just messing with me, aren't you? In that case, don't blame me. Kairos shrugged with a hint of helplessness. Let's just say it's for the ordinary people of this world, and for my own exploration progress. He took a deep breath, his eyes instantly sharpening. His consciousness entered the system inventory, looking at the pile of items labeled Basic Rare Candy, Restricted. It hurt a little. These were meant to be saved for future leaderboard rewards, good stuff to drive player engagement. They were leftovers from previous gacha pulls, 50 or 60 of them, not many to begin with. He couldn't use them himself, so he'd been planning to save them for new players. But now it looked like he couldn't keep them. Whatever. He'd just pull more later. He sighed, but his actions were decisive as he shouted at Gengar, who was desperately dodging electric currents in mid-air. Gengar! Come here for a second. Hearing the summon, Gengar used Shadow Sneak to instantly disengage from the battle, appearing beside Kairos with lingering shock in its eyes. Keek! Kairos quickly pulled out a plain-looking cloth bag, used the system space to transfer all the candies into it, and shoved it into Gengar's arms. Give these to them. Any Pokémon that still has fight left in it, give them one each. Just shove it in their mouths. Gengar clutched the heavy bag, stunned for a moment before understanding dawned. Its little eyes lit up instantly. This candy, wasn't this the stuff that could make Pokémon instantly super strong? This was going to be interesting. Just thinking about what was about to happen made it want to laugh. It nodded vigorously. Gengar. Then it vanished on the spot. The next moment, Gengar's figure began flickering rapidly across the chaotic battlefield. It appeared beside the battered Snorlax and, taking advantage of a brief opening while Snorlax was taking a heavy hit from the armored unit, pulled out a golden candy radiating strange energy and stuffed it right into Snorlax's roaring mouth. Hey! Snorlax's massive body jerked. Was this food? It instinctively swallowed. But the next instant, blinding white light erupted from within its enormous body. Within the white light, Snorlax's frame swelled by a full size. Its wounds healed at a visible rate, and an aura far more powerful and ferocious than before exploded outward. It threw its head back and let out an earth-shaking roar, brimming with raw power. Where it had been pushed back by its opponent before, it now held firm against the heavy armor's claws and even pushed back. Gengar appeared beside Golem, which was being focused down by several amplified Magnezone, its rocky shell scorched and crumbling. Deftly dodging scattered electric bolts, Jengar flicked another golden candy precisely into Golem's mouth, which had opened slightly from pain. Boom! A column of earth yellow energy shot skyward alongside Golem's deep roar. Its body grew even larger and more solid within the white light, its rocky shell becoming thicker and gleaming, cracks healing instantly. A weighty presence like the earth itself spread outward. Golem raised its massive stone fist and slammed it into the ground. Boom! The earth shook violently as a terrifying fissure tore toward the cluster of Magnezone. The powerful shockwave left them wobbling even in midair, their electric currents disrupted. Next, Jengar appeared beside Anvil, whose sand slash was barely clinging to life under concentrated fire. But as soon as a candy went down, white light blazed, Sand Slash's body surged in size, its wounds partially healed, radiating powerful ground-type energy. And so Jengar became like a battlefield courier, weaving through gunfire and energy explosions. One golden candy after another was stuffed into the mouths of battered, near-limit Pokémon. Then came wave after wave of erupting white light. Along with it, surges of suddenly amplified power. The entire battlefield was instantly drowned in cascading light and the roar of exploding strength. Roar! The power-boosted Snorlax physically flipped the Heavyagron onto its back. The newly evolved Magneton teamed up with Electrode, their unleashed electric currents actually suppressing the amplified Magnezone. Golem! The massively enlarged Golem moved like a mobile mountain, each stomp throwing the League's heavy forces into disarray. The tide of battle completely reversed in just 10 seconds. On the League's side, their previously overwhelming heavy assault units were thrown into instant chaos. Kairos watched the scene unfold, sensing the changes, and couldn't help raising an eyebrow. These candies were only basic grade, so how come they seemed to have such a huge effect on these Pokémon? They'd originally been around elite level, so how had they all suddenly reached gym leader level? In his first world, were basic candies this powerful? At the same time, the League soldiers stared in horror at this completely incomprehensible sight. Why were the enemy's Pokémon mass evolving and growing stronger mid-battle? And by this much? This is impossible. What just happened? Those lights. Monsters. They're all monsters. Even Admiral Quinn, whose face had been cold and hard throughout, now showed disbelief in his eyes for the first time. He stared intently at the exploding white lights across the battlefield and the Pokémon whose power was skyrocketing, then snapped his gaze toward the rear, to the corner where a man stood with a pained expression, Kairos. It was him. That intelligence target. What had he done? Quinn had been in the military for years and had never seen anything this bizarre. Retreat. Fall back now. Regroup. A deputy commander shouted frantically into his COMM. Right now, the League's elite forces looked downright pathetic before the Watcher's Pokémon, which had suddenly erupted with unreasonable power. Heavy armor units were overturned, amplified Magnezone were counter-suppressed, soldiers scrambled backward, formations collapsing. And at that moment, Jengar, clutching the now half-empty bag, floated over almost mischievously to Kairos, who had just crawled out of the debris pile and was still in a dazed, frightened state. His Litwick's Pokeball was still lying on the ground. Jengar blinked, looking at the bag, then at the Pokeball on the ground, then back toward Kairos. Kairos was covering his face with his hand, looking absolutely miserable, completely oblivious to what was happening here. Jengar scratched its little head. Well, with this many already, one more won't hurt, right? It quickly pulled out another candy, scooped up Litwick's Pokeball, shoved the candy in through the seam, and then quickly stuffed the ball back into Kairos's arms. Kairos had absolutely no idea what just happened, his face full of confusion. But the next second, the Pokeball in his arms began shaking violently. Blinding white light burst uncontrollably from the ball's seams. An aura far more powerful than any ordinary Litwick's, carrying an eerie blend of ghostly cold and scorching heat, instantly filled the air. The next second. Vroom! The light faded, and a Pokémon far larger than normal, with an elegant and imposing form, hovered before Kairos. Its body was a deep, ghostly blue, like an ornate chandelier. Litwick, boosted by the candy, had evolved directly into Chandelure. Jengar stared at the scene, feeling oddly nostalgic. Damn, why does this feel so familiar? It suddenly remembered something unpleasant from its past. At that moment, the fully evolved Chandelure, its massive purple flames burning steadily, locked its hollow eyes onto the nearest enemy, a heavy armored unit pushing forward. Woo! A low, powerful hum emanated from its giant flame core. Multiple shadow balls shot out like cannon shells, slamming viciously into the armor's steel joints and energy core. Boom! Amid the explosion, the hardened alloy plating was corroded and blown open by the flames, erupting in sparks and black smoke. Then, the purple fireball at Chandelure's center swelled dramatically. A flamethrower shot out like a blazing spear, carrying terrifying heat, instantly piercing through an amplified magnezone that had been wildly electrocuting Golem. The magnezone didn't even have time to scream before its armor melted away, crashing to the ground, knocked out cold. Chandelure's entry into the fray was the final nail in the coffin for the League. Their battle line, already on the verge of collapse after the Watcher's Pokémon collectively evolved and powered up, crumbled even further. Every one of Chandelure's attacks was devastatingly effective. Its dual ghost and fire typing dealt crushing damage to the League's steel-bodied heavy units, something no other Pokémon could match. Nice job, Chandelure! Axuan finally snapped back to reality, jumping up and cheering excitedly. The Watcher's morale soared at the sight. A Snorlax roared and completely flipped over the armor unit that Chandelure had damaged. The League soldiers' faces were filled with fear and despair. Defeat was inevitable. Yet on the other side of the battlefield, Admiral Quinn's face showed no trace of panic despite the collapsing situation. His cold eyes cut through the smoke and scattered soldiers, locking firmly onto Kairos. Chandelure's impossibly fast evolution, the terrifying combat power it displayed immediately afterward, and the collective evolution of all those Pokémon earlier, it all pointed to one thing: that young man possessed some kind of technology that could instantly and massively boost Pokémon's strength, defying all logic. This ability, this technology, was a far greater threat than the entire Watcher organization. If the League couldn't get their hands on this technology, then he had to be eliminated. Right here, right now. No matter the cost. Otherwise, the forces resisting the League would only grow stronger, making them impossible to control. In that split second, Quinn made his decision. The last trace of hesitation vanished from his eyes, leaving only pure killing intent. He grabbed the communicator, his cold voice ringing clearly across the entire battlefield. Target is that special individual. Highest priority elimination. All remaining units, disregard battlefield conditions, disregard your own safety. I repeat, disregard everything. All firepower on him. Wipe him off the face of this world. Anyone who disobeys will be court-martialed. Execute immediately. That man must die. Chapter 216: The Feather's Divine Power and the True Nature of the Genesis Engine. As the command fell, the battlefield roared back to life. At that moment, the lone remaining heavy armor's eyes flared with crimson light as it let out a thunderous bellow. Its steel frame slammed through the golem trying to block its path, sending chunks of rock flying and forcing the Pokémon to retreat. The massive metal beast pivoted violently, its enormous claws tearing through the air with a screaming shriek as they hurtled straight toward Kairos. At the same time, the main cannon on its back emitted a sharp, overloaded whine, its barrel glowing white-hot as it gathered a devastating charge, aimed directly at him. The three Magnezone, battered but still hovering, acted like machines executing their final directive. Ignoring the incoming attacks from all sides, they trained their electrodes on Kairos. Savage currents compressed along their bodies into three massive thunderbolts, each packed with annihilating energy. Even a few heavily armored soldiers who had lost their Pokémon and descended into madness raised their smoking energy rifles, red targeting dots locked dead center on Kairos. Every attack, every killing intent on the battlefield, ignored all other targets in that moment. They existed only to obliterate the man standing in that corner. Jengar felt the barrage of locks closing in from every direction. His purple body tensed instantly. After a brief hesitation, he threw himself in front of Kairos without a second thought, arms spread wide. The sight caught Kairos a little off guard. The ghost had only known him a short while, but he'd already started treating him like family. He glanced at the storm of destruction bearing down on them, pooling every last ounce of strength left on the battlefield. A flicker of resignation crossed his eyes, and he let out a soft sigh. Damn! Still had to cash it in. His palm turned slightly, and a feather appeared, resting quietly in his hand. It was about a foot long, shimmering with an indescribable iridescence. Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, violet, 7 colors flowed through it in perfect harmony. The feather itself didn't radiate overwhelming energy. But the instant it appeared, an indescribable, vast wave of power surged across the entire battlefield. Under the influence of that radiance, the armored mech's descending steel claws became sluggish and heavy. The light gathering at the cannon's barrels flickered and vanished. The Magnazone's compressed thunderbolts wavered violently before dissolving into thin air. Even the soldiers' fingers, poised on their triggers, were frozen by an irresistible force. Deep within their souls, an inexplicable urge rose, a compulsion to lower their weapons. Kairos simply tossed the rainbow-colored feather forward. Whoosh! There was no deafening explosion. No tearing beam of light. Only a visible wave of seven-colored radiance, spreading outward from the feather like a tide, gentle, yet impossibly fast, sweeping across the entire battlefield in an instant. Where the rainbow light passed, the massive purple flames of Chandelure flickered and steadied, growing stronger and more stable, as though blessed by some unseen buff. The Watchers' Pokémon Snorlax, Golem, and the others saw their minor wounds vanish instantly. Their stamina fully restored. An unprecedented surge of power flowed through every fiber of their being. But on the Alliance side, the heavy armor and the amplified Magnazone touched by that radiant wave reacted as though they'd been doused with cleansing water washing away filth. The cold alloy plating on their frames began to emit wisps of eerie black smoke. Flames erupted across their surfaces, and within moments, they simply disappeared. The entire battlefield fell into a strange, frozen silence. With Kairos at its center, an invisible domain formed, an absolute territory brimming with boundless vitality and peace. And behind him, a colossal phantom emerged. The moment the phantom appeared, it was as though the entire underground world had been illuminated. It was enormous, radiating light like a rainbow. Its wings and long tail feathers seemed made of flowing, seven-colored flames, so bright they were almost blinding. Scree! A soul-piercing, majestic cry echoed in the depths of every person's mind. Then, an indescribable presence mixed with awe-inspiring vitality and crushing pressure surged outward like a tidal wave. The entire field went silent. Everyone froze in place, as if encased in ice. Trainers and Pokémon alike stood motionless, breath forgotten. They stared, wide-eyed, at the colossal phantom that seemed to cover half the sky. Such overwhelming power, such a presence, none of them had ever encountered anything like it in their entire lives. Before this seven-colored, radiant phantom of Ho-Oh, before its crushing, overwhelming force, every human and Pokémon felt nothing but profound shock and reverence. No one dared even to breathe. And the earlier kill order against Kairos? In the face of the might displayed by that small rainbow feather, it seemed laughably insignificant. The crazed determination that had driven the Alliance soldiers, fueled by their death command, was snuffed out like a candle doused with ice water. What replaced it was dawning terror. Not fear of the enemy. Fear of a power beyond comprehension. The force was holy and warm, yet to them, it was more terrifying than anything else in existence. Run! Run! Someone was the first to scream, their voice cracking with panic and despair. That shout was like the first domino falling. Boom! The Alliance soldiers and Pokémon, who had barely been holding formation and trying to execute Quinn's insane orders, completely collapsed. What highest priority elimination? What court-martial for disobedience? None of it mattered in the face of this mythical apparition. Not just the humans, the heavy armor's engines roared with piercing whines as their treads spun in reverse. Magnazone crashed into each other in terror, stampeding toward the entrance in a frantic scramble. Some Alliance soldiers even started brawling with each other, fighting to squeeze into the narrow passage first. The scene was utter chaos. Useless. You're all useless. Get back here. Follow orders. Quinn stood amidst the wreckage, his face iron-grey, screaming into his communicator. But his authoritative voice was drowned out by the soldiers' panicked shouts, utterly powerless. He tried to draw his sidearm and shoot the deserters, but his arm wouldn't even lift. The power of that sacred phantom had robbed him of even the ability to raise his weapon, let alone anything else. Just then, a massive purple figure wreathed in searing heat came barreling toward him. It was the newly evolved Chandelure. Ghostly cold flames spread instantly across the ground, forming a containment ring that trapped him in place. Then Mason Hart, along with several elite watchers who'd recovered their senses, charged forward. Ilara's wounds were completely healed. She strode up quickly, a weapon scavenged from an Alliance soldier steady in her hands, aimed squarely at Quinn's head. Anvil, with Golem and Snorlax in tow, blocked Quinn's last escape route. Don't move. Quinn's body went rigid. He looked around at the Watchers, people his forces had been beating into submission just moments ago, now fully restored by the Phantom's power, their eyes burning with vengeance. Then he glanced at his own troops, long since scattered without a trace. Finally, his gaze landed on the rainbow feather in Kairos's hand. A trace of defeat and disbelief flickered across his cold features. He slowly released his grip on the communicator, letting it fall to the dust and oil-stained ground. "You!" he croaked, trying to maintain some shred of dignity, but there was no strength left in his voice. He simply couldn't understand. What was this kid? How could everything he pulled out be more terrifying than the last? The candy from before was one thing, but this feather, what the hell was it? Clean up the battlefield. Confiscate all usable equipment. Especially their comms and command gear. Move. Ilera barked orders immediately. The Watchers snapped out of their shock and erupted into cheers of relief before quickly springing into action. They began collecting abandoned weapons and salvaging valuable metal components from the clunky but high-value armor wreckage. On Kairos's end, he put the feather away, and the Ho-Oh phantom vanished instantly. The item's effect, yet, definitely lived up to the hype. Ho-Oh was one of the top-tier legendaries for a reason. The pressure and impact just now? No complaints. But using it up like that, man, it really did feel like a waste. As he mulled it over, he glanced down at the environmental recorder strapped to his chest. The indicator light was still green. The data he'd filmed from the surface world was intact. He let out a small sigh of relief. The feather's burst of power had been so sudden, he'd been worried this fragile device wouldn't survive the energy surge. Good thing it held up. Otherwise, all that footage would have been for nothing. He looked up, his gaze locking directly onto General Quinn, restrained by Chandelur's flaming chains. The general's uniform was covered in dust. Kairos noticed a small, inconspicuous black metal plate about the size of a palm hanging from his belt. As Kairos's eyes fell on it, Quinn instinctively covered it with his hand. Kairos raised an eyebrow. "Mason." He called the old chain smoker by his current name. "Check out that thing on his belt." Mason stepped forward without hesitation. Under Quinn's watchful glare, he yanked the black data pad free without ceremony. The pad was heavy, with no visible ports. Only a small biometric scanner blinked faintly with a red light. "Hat," Quinn sneered, his earlier despair seeming to evaporate as he regained some of his condescending composure. "Top-tier ARC core encryption. Physically isolated. Dynamic biometric key binding. You sewer rats could have 500 years and you'd never." But before he could finish his sentence, Mason's face remained expressionless as he reached into the pocket of his greasy coat and pulled out something that looked like a metal finger cap, still streaked with dark, congealed red. It was a piece of a hand he'd torn off one of the Alliance officers Chandelure had charred earlier. Then, with his mechanical prosthetic index finger, he pressed hard into a recessed slot on the side of the data pad. Click! A faint sound echoed. At the same time, his fingertip glowed with a soft blue light, as though inputting some complex sequence of commands. Hum! The black coating on the data pad's surface vanished instantly, revealing the smooth screen beneath. The screen lit up. A blue progress bar began scrolling rapidly. Quinn's sneer froze completely. His cold eyes, which had widened in shock so many times today, went wide once more, fixed on Mason's practiced movements and the weathered lines of his face, as though trying to recognize something. "You, who the hell are you? How do you know the ARC's engineer backdoor protocol?" His voice trembled. Mason didn't bother responding. He stayed focused on the screen. A few seconds later, a crisp beep sounded. The complicated authentication interface disappeared, replaced by a dense array of file folders and charts. "There. Unlocked." Mason shrugged wearily and handed the data pad to Kairos. Quinn's face drained of all color in that instant, turning deathly pale, as though every ounce of life had been sapped from him. His last shred of confidence had been shattered in a way he couldn't begin to comprehend. What the hell was going on today? Why was everything going so wrong? Kairos took the metal data pad and tapped a few times on the smooth screen. It looked like the thing held quite a bit of information. Mason leaned in as well, and the two of them browsed through the files marked as top secret. After just a few pages, both their expressions turned grim, brows furrowed tightly. The full scope of the Genesis engine project ran far deeper than they'd ever imagined. This wasn't some benign energy device. The engineering diagrams on the data pad clearly showed it was an immense geothermal directional detonation and channeling system. Its core components had all been placed at the most fragile connection points in the crust, places known as ley lines, energy veins running through the earth. The plan's objective was to simultaneously detonate compressed charges planted at key ley line nodes at a precisely calculated moment. This would create an artificial megafault, which they'd then use to extract massive amounts of energy all at once. The goal was to forcibly extract all available energy from deep within the core and mantle in the shortest time possible, using the energy eruption caused by tearing apart the ley lines. As for the consequences, inside the datapad, an assessment report laid it out in the simplest terms possible. The torn Earth will trigger chain reactions of supervolcanic eruptions and catastrophic earthquakes. The ley line energy, now wild and uncontrolled, will unleash energy storms across the entire surface world, powerful enough to tear apart the ecosystem that has spent 5 centuries recovering, reducing it to a scorched wasteland. The underground world, deprived of the surface as an ecological buffer and energy source, will also suffer impacts. Localized regions may experience collapse and disasters of catastrophic scale. Once the plan begins, the negative effects cannot be reversed. Extreme caution is advised before proceeding. Chapter 21 The solution returned to reality. It was glaringly obvious now. This wasn't some beautiful plan to reclaim the surface world at all. It was the Alliance preparing to drag the entire surface, even the slums of the lower districts, down with them in a suicide pact, all for their own twisted private agenda. Kairos's gaze locked onto the blood-red countdown displayed on the operation timeline. Main detonation sequence preheating completion, 92%. Time until final activation, 167 hours, 32 minutes, 15 seconds. 167 hours. That was just 7 days. Less than a week remained before this plan went live. How could they be moving this fast? Kairos felt a jolt of surprise. When he'd first arrived in this world, the Genesis engine had barely made its public debut. He'd witnessed its very first unveiling. His eyes swept across a heavily encrypted memo attachment. Mason Hart had already forced it open using his access privileges. The contents were brief, but they mentioned one critical piece of information. The final authorization required to activate the Genesis engine's core control system wasn't an electronic password or biometric scan. It was an ancient artifact known only as the key. This artifact contained a unique and powerful energy. Its primary function was to stabilize the most dangerous, most volatile phase of the initial ley line rupture process during engine startup, preventing the energy from spiraling out of control and consuming the entire underground city in an instant. But due to some incident, the key had suddenly vanished. The Alliance had been secretly searching for this key, but apparently they still hadn't found it. Kairos could practically feel the urgency radiating from between the lines of the memo. See it now. General Quinn's icy voice cut through the silence. His deathly pallor had faded somewhat, replaced by a strange calm. He'd clearly caught the grim expressions on Kairos's and Mason Hart's faces. You can't stop it. Quinn's voice carried a note of mockery. The engine preheating is in its final stage. Stop it. Ha! Without the key to stabilize the ley lines, if you forcibly interrupt the preheating energy flow, the subterranean energy will spiral out of control and backflow on a massive scale. Half the underground city will be blown sky high. Whether it's you, or those wretches you're trying to protect, everyone's coming down with me. Madness flickered in his eyes as he stared at Kairos. Kid, Quinn's voice dropped, taking on an urgent, coaxing tone. I know you're special. Those candies, and that feather. How about this, I'll make you a deal on behalf of the Alliance. He licked his lips and continued, let me go. Then hand over every scrap of intel you've gathered about the surface, especially the environmental data and information on those powerful creatures. I can use my authority to petition for a delay in the engine's activation. That way, you might buy yourselves more time. And with that precise surface data, we can recalculate and optimize the Genesis engine's energy extraction pathways. Sure, the surface ecosystem collapsing is inevitable, but at least, we could reduce some of the damage. Let certain areas retain a sliver of vitality. And the underground slums would be safer too, wouldn't they? On top of that, I'm extending an invitation from the Alliance for you to join us. Someone with your abilities would definitely catch the eye of the higher UPS. He stared intently into Kairos's eyes, searching for any hint of wavering. But Kairos listened to Quinn's pitch with a completely blank expression. A deal? If he believed a word this man said at a time like this, that would be truly insane. He could see it clearly now. The Alliance members in this world had long since lost their minds. All they cared about was power and the continuation of their rule. Nothing else mattered to them. And right now, Quinn would say anything to save his own skin. Only a fool would trust him. Kairos's mind raced, but he wasn't considering Quinn's proposal at all. Instead, he was fixated on the key mentioned in the memo, and gouging fire. A question had forced its way into his thoughts. Who ruled over that vast primordial forest on the surface world right now? Gouging fire did. The ancient species Entei, who utterly despised chaotic and disorderly metallic noise and unnatural energy pollution. If the lunatics down here really activated that so-called Genesis engine, the surface world would be devastated in an instant, the environment torn to shreds. And when that happened, Kairos swallowed hard. Wasn't that the equivalent of setting a fire directly in a divine beast's home, right in front of it? As the master of this land, what would gouging fire do? Add to that the Pokédex entry describing its extreme aversion to such things. Honestly, at that point, the question wouldn't be whether the Genesis engine succeeded or not. The question would be whether the entire underground world could survive a full-scale assault from an enraged legendary Pokémon. Once gouging fire's fury descended, forget the Ark plan. The underground city would likely end up exactly as Quinn had just cursed. Everyone inside, from the high and mighty Alliance members to the struggling Watchers and ordinary citizens, would all be incinerated into non-recyclable waste in one fell swoop. After all, this was a genuine legendary Pokémon they were talking about. And given that the people in this world couldn't even withstand the residual power of Ho-Oh's feather, how could they possibly face gouging fire directly? Following that logic, if something like this actually happened, his Pokédex quest, the game launch in this world, his exploration progress, everything would be ruined. It would all fall apart. All his prior investment in exploration, all those rare candies and feathers he'd given out, would all be wasted. If that happened, he'd lose everything, right down to his shirt. Kairos's entire body stiffened. Now, stopping the engine's activation wasn't about helping others or pursuing some noble ideal anymore. Now it was purely about not taking a massive loss. The moment he calmed down, Kairos immediately grasped the crux of the problem. The key lay in that key. The Alliance hadn't found it. So where would an ancient artifact containing special life energy be? Kairos's gaze involuntarily drifted back toward the base entrance, piercing through the heavy metal gates and rock layers toward that surface world he'd visited before. Could it be on the surface? Or was there something that could substitute for this key? Just as Kairos's mind spun at top speed, the system notification chimed in his ear. System notice. Current world exploration rate, 80%, and minimum exploration time requirement met. Conditions for dimensional communicator return satisfied. Return to primary world immediately. Yes/no. Notice, current world to primary world time flow ratio is 3:1. For every day the host remains in this world, approximately 3 days will pass in the primary world. The notification came so suddenly that Kairos froze. 80% exploration rate already? Though thinking about it, after exposing the Genesis engine's true nature, encountering ancient and future species, foiling the Alliance's siege, learning the engine's core secrets. After all those major events, reaching 80% made sense. As for returning to the primary world? His first instinct was absolutely not. After all, there was still such a huge problem here to solve. He could stay in this world for at least 24 hours, there was plenty of time to figure something out. But the next second, Kairos's eyes landed on the last line of the system notice, and he froze completely. 1 day in this world equaled 3 days in the real world. So conversely, 1 day in the real world would equal only a third of a day here, right? Which meant that if he returned to the real world, the remaining time until the Genesis engine activated would become 21 days. The tension gripping Kairos instantly eased. 21 days was way more comfortable than 7. He could accomplish so much in that time. He quickly weighed his options. On one hand, if he returned to the primary world, he might be able to obtain items containing life energy that could affect the Genesis engine. He could also improve his own strength. After this battle with the Alliance, he'd clearly felt that Jengar alone wasn't enough anymore. Chandelure should be able to handle things better. Though Jengar had performed admirably, when facing the Alliance's true elite forces, especially those heavy armor units and augmented Magnezone, he'd already started to struggle. After all, he was only a gym leader tier Pokémon. But if the Elite 4 level Chandelure came instead? That would be a completely different story. And during this trip back, he might even find a way to help Chandelure break through to champion level. After all, he'd have 3 weeks. On the other hand, in this world, the Alliance had completely locked down all information channels. There was no way his game could be distributed. Unless the Genesis engine and the Alliance were dealt with, his game development system's mission in this world couldn't progress at all. He had to resolve this urgent crisis first. His mind made up, Kairos didn't hesitate. He mentally selected the yes option. He raised his head, his gaze sweeping across the watchers who were busy confiscating equipment, restraining Quinn, their faces mixing victorious joy with uncertainty about the future. Finally, his eyes settled on Mason Hart, Ilera, and Actuan. Everyone. Kairos's voice wasn't loud, but it cut clearly through the base's chaos. You may have won for now, but the Alliance definitely won't let this go. With your strength, holding them off shouldn't be a problem, but from here on, you'll truly have to rely on yourselves. I need to leave for a bit. Mason Hart's brow furrowed. He turned back, immediately understanding. You're going back? Yeah, temporarily. Kairos didn't explain much. Interdimensional travel wasn't something that could be easily explained anyway. I'm going to see if I can find something to deal with that Genesis engine. I'll be back within 5 days. Ilera looked into Kairos's eyes. Finding no panic there, only steady resolve, she nodded firmly. Understood. We'll wait for you. Actuan clutched the pokeball containing his newly evolved Chandelure, whose aura was still somewhat unstable, his face full of worry and reluctance. Still, he forced out a firm Where are you going? What I said, won't you really reconsider? Quinn shouted. Kairos cast one final glance at Quinn, bound in chains of fire with his face deathly pale, then at the unlocked data pad in Mason Hart's hands. He said nothing more. The next moment, under everyone's astonished gaze, Kairos's form flickered several times, then became transparent, before vanishing completely from the spot as if he'd never existed. Leaving only the watchers standing frozen in place, staring at where Kairos had disappeared, utterly dumbfounded. Dash. Meanwhile, atop MT Coronet, inside that rustic villa, Cynthia had just finished a full day of training and work. Feeling somewhat tired, she made herself a steaming cup of hot cocoa and settled down at her computer desk. Outside the window stretched the uniquely crisp, cool night sky of the Sinnoh region. Her gaze fell on the monitor on her desk, her heart stirring slightly. In the game, her experiences in the Hone region, that heart-pounding battle at Pseudopolis City, and the terrifying power displayed by that final starship, were all burned into her memory like brands. She couldn't wait to continue advancing through the game. However, when she'd tried to challenge the gym that morning, the game had notified her that the later content hadn't been completed yet. The disappointment had been instant, leaving her no choice but to take her Pokémon out for training instead, while tackling the official duties she'd let pile up recently. Now, she set down her cup, walked to the computer, and pressed the power button. The screen lit up. Her cursor habitually slid toward that green icon. The game launched. The logo popped up. And beside that familiar logo floated a small text prompt, New content update detected. Download and install immediately. An update. Cynthia immediately straightened in her seat, feeling her entire body come alive as all her fatigue vanished. She clicked the download button without hesitation. Soon, as the game update completed and she re-entered, her character had successfully made it inside the final gym, Pseudopolis Gym. Cynthia took a deep breath, her eyes shining. The final gym challenge was beginning. Like the previous gyms, it only took Cynthia a few minutes to grasp the situation. The gym's interior was a massive ice field. Though the surface was smooth, normal walking was impossible. Challengers needed to use the ice's sliding properties and follow specific paths to reach the platform where gym leader Juan waited. Most critically, certain areas of the ice would shatter immediately after being crossed and couldn't be triggered again. This meant players couldn't retrace the same route, they had to plan their sliding path with precision. And this puzzle's difficulty was clearly higher than the previous ones. Chapter 218 Disturbance in the Ghost World? Cynthia's Champion Battle. After some exploration, Cynthia successfully used her previous experience with the game's mechanics to defeat numerous blocking NPCs and finally reached gym leader Juan. And for this ice-type gym, Victini had been itching for action. As the battle music started, the victory Pokémon unleashed overwhelming power. Once carefully trained Walrein, Froslass, and Glolly found their ice typing hopelessly outmatched against Victini's powerful offensive capabilities and durability. Flames flashed one after another, super effective notifications popping up repeatedly. The battle ended even faster than Cynthia had anticipated. As the final gym, Juan didn't even force her into a second round of challenges. Another clean sweep. With cheerful victory music playing, Juan offered his praise tinged with helplessness, presenting her with the final batch, the rain batch, and the Humfer waterfall. After leaving the gym, Cynthia glanced at the map and quickly navigated her character using surf to reach the entrance to Victory Road. A massive waterfall stretched before her, its currents fierce, white mist drifting everywhere. This was the final obstacle to Victory Road. Cynthia had Ludicolo use the newly learned waterfall. A pale blue glow surrounded the carefree Pokémon as it immediately carried her into the rushing cascade. The violent, turbulent water seemed tamed by an invisible force before it, forming climbable steps. Just like that, she ascended steadily to the waterfall's summit, step by step. Standing at the top, strong winds whipped at her character's clothing. Before her loomed the entrance to a deep, dark cavern. Above the entrance, ancient and solemn text was carved, Victory Road. Gazing at this entrance that symbolized the starting point of a trainer's ultimate challenge, Cynthia felt a wave of emotion. In this moment, she felt transported back years ago to when she first stood before the gates of the Sinnoh League, about to begin her own champion challenge. That mix of excitement, nervousness, anticipation for the unknown challenges ahead, and yearning for the pinnacle of what a trainer could achieve, it was remarkably similar to what she felt now. At this point, she realized she felt somewhat reluctant. This game that had brought her countless moments of shock and surprise, that had even revealed so many secrets behind the world's surface, seemed to be approaching its end. No matter how she looked at it, after challenging the league and becoming champion, the game's content would probably be finished, right? She could only hope that once it ended, she'd receive answers to all her questions. She took a deep breath, then firmly pressed the forward key. Her on-screen character stepped into the dark cavern leading to the summit. Meanwhile, elsewhere, in a certain bizarre space. This was a world without sunlight. The air was thick like black ink, permeated with the scent of stale earth and a chilling coldness. The sky was completely black, devoid of sun or moon, with only occasional drifting wisps of distorted grey-white fog. The earth was cracked and barren, utterly lifeless, showing only dead trees stretching out withered branches like grasping phantom claws. In the air, clusters of will-o-wisps flickered erratically, their restless light illuminating the jagged rocks on the ground. This was a strange space that existed outside reality, belonging to ghost-type Pokémon. The Ghost World. At this moment, a man wearing a deep grey, antiquely styled robe walked slowly along a path. He seemed long accustomed to the deathly silence and cold here. But today, something felt off. He kept looking around, as if something was about to happen. The air seemed even thicker. The drifting will-o-wisps grew more agitated, accelerating their movement, their ghostly light flickering more urgently, as if influenced by some invisible force. Even the ground beneath his feet trembled continuously, imperceptibly. None of this seemed normal. The man quickened his pace, passing through a bizarre archway formed from massive, pale bones, arriving at the most core and most forbidden location of this ghost world region. Here appeared to be an altar of sorts. Behind the altar, a massive circular abyss stretched down endlessly. Only freezing dark winds spiraled up from below, creating low, howling sounds. At the center of the abyss floated a huge black stone platform covered in ancient runes. At the platform's center rested a massive stone coffin. This coffin had existed for untold ages. Its entire body was cast from some kind of strange black stone material, its surface covered in indecipherable, eerie patterns, radiating an oppressive aura that weighed on one's very soul. The coffin's lid was exceptionally thick, with 9 arm-thick red nails driven into it, each one also covered in runes. As if to seal something firmly within this stone coffin. At this moment, the man stood beside the coffin, quietly observing it, seemingly sensing for something. 1 minute passed. 10 minutes passed. He watched for a long time, trying to detect any sign of abnormality. Yet no matter how he observed, the coffin simply lay there quietly, completely motionless. Finally, after who knows how long, the man breathed a slight sigh of relief and quickly turned to leave. But just as he departed, vanishing into the dark shadows. Near the edge of the coffin lid, one of the 9 sealing nails, the one whose head bore twisted serpentine patterns, moved ever so slightly. Then everything returned to calm, as if nothing had happened at all. Cerulean City, Kanto region. Looking at the familiar room layout before him, Kairos couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Finally back. The air over there really didn't smell great. This is much more comfortable. Now that he was home again, Kairos's tense nerves could finally relax somewhat. He instinctively glanced around. Chandelure still wasn't in the room, she'd probably gone off to play somewhere again. Kairos shook his head, pulling his attention back to the biggest problem at hand. The Genesis engine countdown flashed constantly on his system panel, 21 days. That was real-world time, meaning he needed to find a solution within 2 weeks in the real world, then return to solve that world's problems. He quickly organized his thoughts. His current core objectives were twofold. First, improve his own strength so that the next time he went to that world, he'd be sufficiently equipped to face those future species, ancient species, and alliance members. He'd probably need to reach at least champion level. Second, find items containing powerful life energy to substitute for that lost key and prevent the Genesis engine's activation. For improving strength, rare candies were undoubtedly the fastest and most direct option. Rare candies could directly boost experience, while the Master Ball item's effect would double all experience gained by his Pokémon. But Kairos frowned slightly. The rare candies marked as restricted sitting in his system inventory were like a visible but untouchable pile of gold to him. These candies could only be distributed to players, his own Pokémon couldn't use them. The only time he'd obtained unrestricted candies was after completing that system quest and receiving the gift box. This was a bit troublesome. System quests. He instinctively checked his quest panel. But just then, a series of rapid system notifications suddenly rang out in his mind. Ding! Detected large amounts of high-intensity emotional fluctuations, shock, fear, awe, ecstasy. Source: individuals from alternate world, Watcher Organization members, Alliance soldiers, General Quinn. Calculating emotion points. Calculation complete. Total emotion points gained from this event, 2,273 points. Ding! Current world, ID, 002, cumulative emotion points exceeded 11,000. Dimensional communicator, bound to world 002, function unlocked. Notice: host may activate dimensional communicator at any time to travel to the next world. Kairos paused, then immediately understood. Of course. The battle he'd just experienced at the Watcher base, especially Ho-Oh's appearance, had obviously been explosive enough for both the Watchers and Alliance members. Their emotions, friend and foe alike, had naturally all been converted into points. Over 2,000 points, added to his previous accumulation, he now had 50,000 points total. However, being able to use the dimensional communicator to connect to a new world, that could wait. His exploration of World 2 had already reached 80%. Only the final 20% remained before he could unlock special worlds through targeted selection at 100%. Now definitely wasn't the time. His gaze fell on the quest panel. Main quest, Legendary Foundation, SS. Quest requirements. 1. Achieve over 10 million paid downloads for any single game you've created in a single world. 2. Unlock and use at least one advanced production module to create a new game, and achieve at least 5 million sales for that game. Quest rewards, 10,000 emotion points, Seed of the World Fragment X1, Random Legendary Tier Production Module X1. Seed of the World Fragment. Kairos suddenly realized that just from the name alone, this thing sounded like it might contain that so-called life energy. Maybe this thing could actually substitute for the Genesis engine's key? He pulled up the sales data for Pokémon Emerald from the system panel. As of this moment, paid downloads had reached 9.2 million. Only a little more until the first requirement's 10 million. Conservatively estimated, it would be complete within 2 days. The second requirement, unlock and use an advanced production module. In that instant, Kairos suddenly remembered something. Hadn't the system rewarded him with an advanced module when he completed a prerequisite main quest before? He immediately began searching through the depths of the system interface. Sure enough. A module icon glowing with pale golden light sat quietly in a corner. S-Rank Special Production Module, PWS, Parallel World Server. Description: activating this module allows games you create to be loaded via virtual projection onto any intelligent life form, human, individuals in other worlds you've visited, making them your players. Additional effect: emotion points obtained through the PWS module are increased to 200% of base value during calculation. Kairos slapped his forehead. After crossing into World 2, things had been so hectic that he'd completely forgotten about this treasure. With this, who cared about the alliance? He could directly install the game into every person's mind in that world. No matter how powerful that alliance was, they couldn't control what was inside ordinary people's heads, right? Well, if it was that world, maybe it wasn't entirely impossible. But that aside, the only regret about this module was that loading targets were limited to humans. This meant that legendary Pokémon like Rayquaza, or other Pokémon, couldn't become his players for now. Still, having this module was already a massive breakthrough. He carefully read through the module description, his brow furrowing slightly again. This PWS module had one critical limitation. It could only be used in other worlds and couldn't affect the current primary world. This was probably one reason he'd subconsciously overlooked it before. So the path forward was clear. To complete the quest, he still needed to unlock a new advanced production module that could be used in the primary world and integrate it into the next game, Pokémon Mystery Dungeon, Rescue Team. Then, within 3 weeks, get Rescue Team to sell 5 million copies in the primary world. But would there be enough time? Kairos quickly calculated. Emerald had gone from release to nearly 10 million downloads in just about 10 days. 3 weeks should theoretically be more than enough. But the prerequisite was that Rescue Team itself had to be as compelling as Emerald. He sat down at his desk and turned on his computer monitor. Who knew what those people at Dream Factory had managed to create based on the game concept he'd given them? Dash. Meanwhile, atop MT Coronet, Cynthia took a deep breath, her fingertips steady on the keyboard. On screen, her character Strawberry Ice Cream stood before the magnificent and sacred hall entrance of the Home League Champions Chamber. Behind her lay Victory Road, which she'd just struggled through, that long trial path filled with powerful wild Pokémon and elite trainers that required ample supplies to traverse. She'd spent nearly all the money she'd accumulated in the game buying various recovery items before finally making it through that massive maze. At this moment, her team was neatly arranged in the status bar. Victini, LV 75. Sceptile, LV 74. Ludicolo, LV 74. Rotom, LV 75. Pelipper, LV 73. Besides these 5 Pokémon that had accompanied her from the start, there was one more. After defeating the Pseudo-Poly's gym, the egg had finally hatched, and what emerged was actually a little Wynot. She'd deliberately brought this Wynot along to grind experience in Victory Road, and it had now reached level 70. Scanning across these 6 team members, Cynthia felt a surge of confidence. These Pokémon's movesets and type coverage were all well balanced. The Rain Team core of Ludicolo and Pelipper were both present. It was time to meet the Hone Elite Four. So then, her first opponent. She guided her character forward, stepping onto the first long staircase before her. Chapter 219. Wait, you said that person was who? The mysterious white figure. Entering the hall, Cynthia looked at the male character on screen wearing a punk-style jacket with sharp eyes. Her gaze narrowed slightly. This should be the first Elite Four member. Something felt familiar about him. This person seemed to be Sydney? Yes, it should be him. In the real world Sinnoh, she'd heard of this Hone Elite Four member famous for his wild and unrestrained dark-type specialty. It shouldn't be too difficult, right? After all, he's only the first one. With that thought, she took a deep breath, selected Victini as her lead Pokémon, and pressed the Confirm Challenge button. However, the next moment, the screen suddenly went dark and a glaring red game notification popped up. Warning! Mythical Pokémon, Victini, detected. According to Special League regulations, this battle is considered invalid. Challenge terminated. Cynthia froze. She stared at that line for several seconds before it registered. There was actually this kind of restriction? Elite Four challenges didn't allow mythical Pokémon? Somewhat amused and exasperated, she could only have her character open the PC terminal and temporarily deposit the battle-ready Victini. Fine. Now she only had 5 main fighters left. She walked back toward the entrance to Sydney's chamber. However, the 2 expressionless guard NPCs at the door raised their hands to stop her again. A new system notification appeared. Detected, player's team has fewer than 6 Pokémon and not all meet current level requirements, LV 60+. Cannot challenge Elite Four. Cynthia froze again. Fewer than 6? So now she needed to train another Pokémon to full level. Who should she choose? Cynthia's fingertips unconsciously tapped the keyboard. She reassessed her team. Sceptile was grass type, Ludicolo was water and grass, Rotom was electric and ghost, Pelipper was water and flying, Wobbuffet was psychic. The team's core was actually a rain team, with Ludicolo and Pelipper as the key members. She needed a powerful physical attacker who could also cover type weaknesses, especially ground type. A blue, solid, reliable figure suddenly flashed through her mind, Swampert. Water and ground type. Perfect for a rain team. Water type attacks gained boosted power in rain, and ground type provided immunity to electric attacks while offering the widely effective, high-powered earthquake move. More importantly, a Swampert Megastone she'd obtained by chance was still sitting quietly in her bag. That's it. So her new training target was locked in, Mudcup. Now, where could she find a Mudcup? Cynthia wasn't as familiar with wild Pokémon distribution in the Hone region as she was with Sinnoh, and naturally even less so in the game. Throughout her entire journey, she didn't think she'd ever encountered any starter Pokémon in the wild. After thinking it over, she opened the game's forum. The official developers seemed to have noticed this forum's existence. Now players could even access the forum directly through an in-game portal. The forum remained lively as ever. With the growing player base, forum activity had increased correspondingly. Cynthia quickly browsed, trying to find information about Mudcup habitats. Under a thread discussing water-type Pokémon catches, she spotted a help post with few replies. Newbie question, is Swampert worth training? Where can I catch Mudcup? Cynthia casually opened the reply box and typed, Swampert is definitely worth raising, especially paired with a rain team. Excellent physical attack and durability, plus the possibility of Mega Evolution. As for Mudcup, I remember it's in. Just as she sent that portion, she paused. Wait, wasn't she also here looking for Mudcup's location? How did she end up teaching someone else? Just as she hesitated, a system notification popped up, Player Plate of Earth, online, has requested to add you as a friend. Plate of Earth? That's an odd name. Cynthia clicked accept. The friend request barely went through before a private message popped up, hello, saw your reply under that thread. Are you also interested in Swampert? Cynthia replied, yes. Want to catch one to complete my team for the Elite Four challenge. Do you know where Mudcup can be fished? The other person fell silent for a moment before the message came back, Route 111, near the desert edge at that small pond. Use a good rod. The rate isn't great, requires some patience. The information was precise. Thanks. Cynthia noted the location. Route 111, pond near the desert edge. She was about to close the window when another message arrived from the other person. By the way, you mentioned Mega Evolution earlier, what is that? I don't think I've heard of it. Cynthia was somewhat surprised. This Plate of Earth person knew Mudcup's location and seemed like a veteran player, yet didn't know about Mega Evolution? She explained, it's a special form of evolution. Requires the Pokémon to hold a corresponding Megastone and be activated by the trainer during battle. Both appearance and abilities receive massive boosts after evolution, though it only lasts until the battle ends. Very powerful. Oh? Special evolution? Massive power boost. The person seemed very interested. Where can these Megastones be obtained? Cynthia thought back, I got mine in Rustboro City. There's a small house on the east side of the city with a man who looks very sad inside. He says his daughter went missing. If you donate money to him and reach a certain amount, he'll give you a random Megastone as thanks. She shared her experience obtaining her first Megastone. Though you need to have a Pokémon capable of Mega Evolution in your party to trigger the corresponding reward. I see. Rustboro City, donation. The other person repeated it, seemingly noting the information. Thank you very much for the intel, this helps a lot. Hope you catch that Mudcup soon and successfully challenge the Elite Four. The message included a friendly emoji. Thanks for the location info too. Cynthia replied. The two added each other as forum friends, their icons lighting up in each other's friend lists. Cynthia closed the chat window and immediately had her character use Fly, heading toward Route 111. She needed to hurry and fish for that Mudcup. Meanwhile, in Team Rocket's secret base in the Kanto region, inside a dimly lit room filled with various complex instrument screens, a middle-aged man wearing a finely tailored dark suit with an immaculately slicked-back hairstyle slowly leaned back in his wide leather chair. On the massive screen before him displayed the just-concluded chat log, information about Mega Evolution and how to obtain Mega Stones, provided by that player whose name appeared as a string of garbled characters. He was none other than Team Rocket's leader, Giovanni. His sharp gaze swept across the keywords on screen: Special Evolution, Massive Power Boost, Rustboro City Donation. He appeared thoughtful. Mega Evolution, a never-before-heard technology that could instantly boost a Pokémon's power? And it apparently required a specific item called a Mega Stone to activate? A barely perceptible smile curved Giovanni's lips. This was too interesting. If this power was real, then, it would become yet another trump card for Team Rocket's domination of Kanto, even the entire world. Rustboro City. He immediately recalled Team Rocket's sphere of influence distribution map in the Hone region. Good. They had a secret contact point there. He'd send a few people to investigate this situation. If something like this existed in the real world too, then no matter the cost, he had to master this power called Mega Evolution. But speaking of which, his gaze fell on the screen. This person, able to provide so much information about the game, must be quite an accomplished player. Such talent, was there any possibility of recruiting them? He pressed a button on his communicator. Moments later, a sharp-eyed female subordinate in a Team Rocket uniform quickly entered and stood respectfully before the desk. Giovanni didn't look at her, his gaze still fixed on the screen. Investigate this form ID. Find out who's behind it. Giovanni's voice was low. Yes, sir. The subordinate immediately responded, quickly pulling out a portable terminal to work. The base's interior lighting was somewhat dim, only the screen's glow illuminating her focused face. Time passed second by second. Giovanni waited patiently, saying nothing. Sir, found it. The subordinate's voice carried a barely noticeable tension. She turned the terminal screen toward Giovanni, displaying a brief data correlation report. Based on speech pattern analysis across multiple public forums, IP node tracking, and cross-referencing with, residual traces from certain non-public network activities within the Sinnoh League, the target player's real identity, that is, this forum player's identity, points to, the current champion of the Sinnoh region, Cynthia. Giovanni's perpetually calm face froze. His body leaned forward slightly, sharp eyes locked onto the name on screen and the official photo of Cynthia beside it. Wait, what? Who? The air seemed to freeze for several seconds. The crucial intel he'd just obtained about that Mega Evolution capable of instantly boosting Pokémon power, the source was actually the Sinnoh champion? Cynthia? He'd randomly found someone on the forum and ended up asking her? An extremely absurd feeling welled up in Giovanni, leaving him momentarily unsure how to react. Cynthia. Giovanni repeated the name, his tone full of disbelief. He suddenly leaned back against his chair, pinching the bridge of his nose, feeling the situation had completely exceeded his expectations. The Sinnoh champion had actually provided Team Rocket with the key to a power they'd dreamed of? This kind of thing clearly had even Giovanni losing his composure. He waved his hand, signaling the subordinate could leave, and remained alone staring at the screen, sinking into deeper contemplation. Meanwhile, at the MT Coronet Villa, Cynthia had no idea who she'd just encountered. She controlled her character Strawberry Ice Cream, following the location information plate of Earth had provided, arriving at the small pond near the desert edge on Route 111. The clear water surface reflected blue skies and white clouds, forming a stark contrast with the yellow sandstorm scenery not far away. She had her character equip the good rod and cast into the water. Time passed bit by bit. The bobber sank several times, but what came up were only Magikarp or Tentacle. Cynthia wasn't anxious though, patiently casting and reeling repeatedly. Finally, after the bobber shook violently once, her character yanked hard. The screen shook, and the battle interface opened. A blue-skinned Pokémon with a head fin and somewhat dopey-looking eyes appeared in the battle frame, a Mudcup. Cynthia's lips curved slightly upward as she easily captured it with a prepared Great Ball. Perfect. Objective achieved. She was about to leave for a training spot when her gaze was drawn to an inconspicuous crevice in the rock wall behind the pond. Behind that crevice, seemed to be a cave? Driven by curiosity, she had her character use surf to cross the pond and walked inside. The cave interior was dimly lit, only the sound of water dripping from stalactites. The passage was narrow and winding. After walking a short distance, the view suddenly opened into a small cavern filled with glowing crystals. At the cavern's center stood a figure, quiet and still. It was a Pokémon she'd never seen before. Its entire body was silvery white with a slender form. A long tail swayed gently behind it, and purple eyes deep as starry skies gazed out. Its entire being radiated an indescribable coldness and power. Cynthia's heart skipped a beat. She could clearly feel that just looking at it through the screen, an oppressive force from the depths of her soul came crashing over her. The feeling it gave her was far more powerful than the Regirock she'd encountered in the desert temple. Even, carrying an aura that transcended ordinary legendaries. Cynthia's character moved forward one step, trying to see more clearly. Just then, that silvery white Pokémon tilted its head slightly, and its purple eyes seemed to pierce through the screen, precisely looking at Cynthia. Buzz! The screen was instantly flooded with blinding white light. When the glow faded, Cynthia was shocked to discover her character had been teleported back to the pond at the cave entrance. Everything that just happened was so fast it felt like an illusion, leaving her no time to react. That Pokémon, what did it do? With just a glance, it forcibly teleported her out? Cynthia remained stunned for quite a while before recovering. After thinking it over, she again controlled her character toward the cave entrance. However, this time, the moment her character approached the rock wall crevice, another flash of white light appeared without warning. She was teleported back to her original position again. This time she didn't even get to see the cavern interior again, let alone that mysterious Pokémon. After brief astonishment, Cynthia instead calmed down. She realized this was definitely not a bug, but some kind of conditional restriction. To enter the cavern, her current strength wasn't enough, or she needed to fulfill some prerequisite condition. Clearly insufficient to explore that cavern, much less contact that unbelievably powerful Pokémon. She glanced at the newly captured Mudkip in her bag. The immediate priority was still to improve her strength and challenge the League. She abandoned the idea of continuing to try, had her character use Fly, and returned to the vicinity of Victory Road's entrance. The wild Pokémon here were high level, making it a good grinding spot. She equipped Mudkip with an EXP share and began the tedious but necessary grinding journey. On another front, in the Paldea region, Ayano sat before her computer screen, looking quite pleased with herself. Earlier in Pokémon Dark Phantom, after some hard-fought battles, she'd successfully captured the legendary Pokémon Entei. Okay, it wasn't really hard-fought battles. More like a beatdown. But that wasn't important. What mattered was that the game had just updated, and she could log back on. Her lips curved upward slightly. Experiencing a legendary Pokémon for the first time, here I come. Chapter 220. The first Elite Four member. Is Entei at Tsundere? As Ayano started her stream and logged into the game, opening her team inventory and clicking on Entei, more and more viewers flooded into her chat, sending the comments flying. Whoa! The streamer actually caught Entei. Totally rigged, Ayano. Breathing in that luck. So jealous I could cry. I already screen recorded the streamer screaming yesterday, hahaha. Seeing the comments, Ayano became even more smug. She deliberately cleared her throat and set Entei as her team's lead Pokémon. Heh, you guys are always blocking my path and challenging me. Now watch how I beat every single one of you down with Entei. She controlled her character and excitedly ran toward the nearby desert area, where several fixed NPC trainers awaited. Soon, she targeted an NPC trainer who rubbed her the wrong way and immediately initiated a battle. The battle began. Ayano pointed dramatically at the screen, full of fighting spirit, pressed the interaction button, and declared, Entei. Use flamethrower. However, the majestic Entei just stood on the field, lazily yawned, and then, slowly lay down, resting its head on its front paws. ZZZ symbols representing sleep status appeared above its head. It had fallen asleep, completely ignoring Ayano's command. The smile on Ayano's face instantly froze. The chat paused for a moment, then erupted into tsunami-like laughter. Wahahaha! Entei, who are you? Don't bug me! Dying laughing, you caught it, but it won't listen. Even digital pets have attitude now. Programmer, did they code it wrong? Is sleep status the highest priority? Ayano.exe has stopped working. Ayano stared at the snoring Entei on screen, then at the endless stream of merciless ha-ha-has, feeling utterly defeated. Only now did she belatedly remember that she had ganged up on Entei and beaten it down by force to catch it. For a legendary Pokémon of that caliber to refuse her orders actually made sense. She scratched her head in frustration. What was she supposed to do now? What's the point of catching it if she couldn't use it? Did she actually have to earn its approval somehow? After exiting the battle, Ayano thought for a moment, then opened her bag and selected Send Out Entei. The towering Entei appeared beside her character, its golden mane gleaming under the virtual sunlight. But its eyes still carried a distant look. It glanced at Ayano's character once, then turned its head away, clearly unwilling to acknowledge her. Ayano took a deep breath. Speaking into her microphone, her voice unusually serious, as if talking directly to the Entei on screen. Entei, listen up. I know you're not satisfied. But that's fine. She paused, her tone becoming more determined. I'll prove my strength to you. One day, I'll face you head-on with just my strongest partner and defeat you fair and square. When that time comes, we'll become true partners. How about it? The Entei on screen seemed to hear her words. It turned its head again, those flame-like golden eyes gazing in the direction of the camera, pausing for a moment, then, it nodded ever so slightly, almost imperceptibly. Then it went back to ignoring Ayano. This scene instantly changed the direction of the chat. Whoa! It nodded. Entei's totally at Tsundere, confirmed. You got this, streamer. Looking forward to the 1v1 showdown, streamer vs legendary beast. The contract is sealed. Seeing Entei nod, Ayano's eyes lit up immediately, her earlier dejection completely swept away. All right. It's a promise. She felt filled with motivation. From now on, she wouldn't just complete the game, she'd work hard to strengthen her main Pokémon to fulfill this promise to Entei. Taking a deep breath, she set off on her gaming journey once more. In Cerulean City, Kairos sat at his desk, slightly frowning as he looked at the sales data for Emerald on the system panel, 9.28 million copies. It was getting closer and closer to the 10 million goal, but Adam's team hadn't reported back yet on the production progress for Mystery Dungeon. With the Genesis engine's countdown ticking away, time was incredibly precious. Just then, the encrypted communication icon on his computer screen began flashing, indicating an email from his collaborative partners. Kairos perked up and immediately clicked it open. The email was concise, expressing the team's awe upon receiving the test project and their determination to give it their all. It included a detailed preliminary planning document for Pokémon Mystery Dungeon, Rescue Team of Time, A&D. A compressed file attachment containing a game test version. This efficient? They already had a test built? Kairos was somewhat surprised. He downloaded the compressed file, extracted it, and ran the test version program. On the screen, the game's icon lit up, prompting him to access the internal test experience program. After launching the game, Kairos's vision went dark, and then he was pulled into a pixelated world. No trainers, no gyms. The perspective was completely locked onto a small Pokémon. He was playing as a Torchic. Around him was a randomly generated forest dungeon made of blocks. The walls, grass, and rivers all carried a distinct pixel art style, yet were reasonably well crafted. He controlled the Torchic as it moved through the dungeon, encountering other Pokémon form NPCs and receiving his first rescue mission, find a lost Oran berry. The dungeon changed every time you entered, with complex terrain full of unknown traps and wild Pokémon enemies. Combat was straightforward, turn-based. Torchic could only use its innate moves, Scratch and Growl. While exploring the dungeon, he'd occasionally pick up various berries to restore health and sometimes discover valuable items. After successfully completing the rescue mission, he returned to base camp, where Torchic received a grateful reward from the client, an Oran berry. With that sequence complete, the test content ended. Kairos exited the test experience, a hint of surprise in his eyes. He'd only given Dream Factory this group of people a concept, yet the level of completion far exceeded his expectations. Though it was just an initial presentation of core gameplay, and the pixel art style was relatively simple, the random dungeon generation algorithm was stable and smooth. The Pokémon's movement and combat controls felt surprisingly solid, and the core loop of rescue missions was clear. Most remarkable was that the unique sense of immersion from playing as a Pokémon and exploring unknown dungeons while helping others had been well captured. Adam and his crew really knew their stuff. Not only did they understand the concept he'd given them, but they'd created something genuinely impressive in such a short time. He'd originally planned just to use this project to test their abilities. He hadn't expected to directly obtain such a promising prototype. But truthfully, as it stood now, it was still far from meeting his expectations for the rescue team of Time. After all, unlike him, they hadn't experienced the original game and didn't know what made it truly special. Kairos leaned back in his chair, fingers lightly tapping the desk as he looked at the crude yet vibrant test version icon on his computer screen, then glanced at the constantly ticking Genesis engine countdown on the system panel. Once this game was completed, he could use that advanced module to break through the League's blockade and release it directly in the second world. It should quickly complete the sales mission, since that world's population didn't seem small either. Once the first requirement of the mission was complete, he'd let rescue team of Time stir up a new storm in the main world. Everything should work out fine. He took a deep breath and began editing a text document, writing down his understanding of Mystery Dungeon and areas that needed improvement, preparing to send it to them. 5 minutes later, Adam's team responded quickly. Their reply came fast, with words brimming with joy at Kairos's approval and enthusiasm, stating they'd start optimizing immediately, even overnight. Kairos could practically picture a group of programmers crowded around computers, rolling up their sleeves. He smiled and closed his email. Now came the hard part, waiting. He glanced at the system interface. Emerald sales numbers were still climbing visibly and rapidly, already breaking 9.3 million, getting closer to the goal. But on the system panel, the Genesis engine activation countdown hung like a sword overhead, constantly reminding him that time waits for no one. 3 weeks might not be as generous as it seemed. Meanwhile, deep in Victory Road, the sound of flowing water echoed constantly. Cynthia had her Swampert use Rock Slide to clear out the last graveler. The Pokémon in her team all glowed with the white light of leveling up. She exhaled softly. After several hours of intense grinding, even she felt mentally fatigued. She opened her team interface, carefully adjusting skills and held items, ensuring Polyper's Rain Dance was foolproof, Ludicolo's coverage was comprehensive, and the recently evolved Swampert was equipped with Earthquake and Rock Slide, filling the team's previous lack of powerful ground and rock-type attacks. She scrutinized every detail, a habit from her time as champion. 3 minutes later, when she stood before Sydney again. As Sydney made his declaration, the battle began. But his tactics were ruthlessly cunning. Reflect, Leech Seed, Sucker Punch, various disruption and priority moves came one after another. The difficulty was exponentially greater than Cynthia had imagined. Most critically, Sydney's Pokémon all exceeded her current level cap, all sitting at level 80. Combined with Victini being banned, Cynthia's challenge hit wall after wall. Worst of all, Mega Evolution Stones were also banned items. Soon, on her first attempt, she fell to the attrition warfare of Cacturne. Second attempt, Honchro's Sucker Punch disrupted her crucial rotation. Third time. Fourth time. Facing repeated defeats, Cynthia didn't grow impatient. After each failure, she quickly reviewed the battle mentally. Shiftry typically used Reflect on turn 2. When Cacturne's HP dropped below half, it prioritized Destiny Bond. Manectric always used Thunderbolt on its first turn unless she had Swampert out, and it had a choice item, so she could swap Swampert out to bait Manectric's locked move. She was solving a complex puzzle, slowly figuring out Sydney's every intention through repeated battles. Finally, after countless attempts, she predicted all of Sydney's commands. Ludicolo, with incredible speed in the rain, carried the team as the main attacker. Swampert stood firm as a rock, tanking critical damage. A critical hit Earthquake directly one-shot the Shiftry in back. Even Wobbuffet, previously unremarkable, used a precisely timed Shadow Tag to trap Cacturne, who was trying to rotate out and recover. When Sydney's last Pokémon fell, Cynthia realized her palms were slightly sweaty. This victory hadn't come easily. It took nearly an hour, during which she'd maintained intense focus the entire time. The system notified her that she'd successfully earned a special reward that would be calculated after challenging the champion, and she'd unlocked the right to challenge the next Elite Four member. But what mattered more to her was that sense of satisfaction from thinking through adjustments and ultimately overcoming a powerful enemy. After exiting the game, real-world fatigue washed over her. Cynthia rubbed her temples and walked to the window, gazing at the deep night outside. As the mental high from intense battling gradually subsided, the image of that mysterious cave and silver-white Pokémon resurfaced in her mind. What exactly was that thing? In Kanto, at Viridian Gym. Giovanni had already returned from the island to his gym. He now sat in the shadows, his knuckles rhythmically tapping against the desk. The brief ripple caused by Cynthia's name had already settled. What occupied his mind now were other matters, concerning risk. An executive, Mattery, entered silently. Target, Eastern Rustboro City. Make low-key contact. Identity disguised as a charity foundation investigator. Avoid any contact with the Sinnoh League or drawing their attention. Personnel, 3. Giovanni's orders were concise and cold. He didn't need to explain, and Mattery would never ask questions. Second, activate intelligence networks level 3 and below. Monitor the Sinnoh League's public activities, especially Cynthia's schedule and official statements. All information reports to me daily. Third, establish a special task force in-game. One objective only, collect everything related to Mega Evolution, Keystones, and Megastones, including text and relevant map locations. Mattery repeated the orders once, confirmed everything was correct, then silently left. Giovanni stood and walked to the massive floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the sleeping Viridian city below. Lights dotted the landscape like pieces on a game board. Giovanni found it difficult to determine whether everything in the game was real or not. He disliked this uncertainty. But he also understood that enormous risks often meant enormous rewards. He needed more information to verify all this. He didn't have to wait long. Half an hour later. The encrypted communicator on Giovanni's desk glowed softly. His subordinate's preliminary report showed, target individual keeps a low profile with minimal outside contact. Directly verifying intelligence authenticity is highly difficult. Avoiding League attention requires a gradual approach. Giovanni thought for a moment, then sent back his directive. Take your time. After sending the message, he turned back to his desk and opened his computer. On the screen, the emerald icon sat quietly. He moved his mouse and clicked once again. Chapter 221 Kairos's Instruction Manual, Mirror Match. The moment the reply file from the encrypted communication channel finished downloading, the air in the private room of the Saffron City Cafe seemed to freeze. Adam's palm holding the mouse was slightly sweaty. He took a deep breath and opened the document labeled Rescue Team of Time Optimization Suggestions and Future Planning. The instant the document loaded, everyone unconsciously leaned forward. However, as the scroll bar rapidly shrank, their expressions gradually shifted from initial excitement and anticipation to surprise. There were way too many words, weren't there? Even engineering manuals for cutting-edge tech products weren't this long. The youngest member of the team, a planner named Lin, had the strongest reaction. He couldn't help muttering under his breath, so many words, what even is all this? This mysterious Wind Studio leader had boundless creativity. Being able to create Emerald and propose a game concept like Mystery Dungeon was genuinely brilliant. But when it came to specific level design and numerical balance, areas requiring extensive experience and data support, deep down he still felt that professionals like them, formally trained and tempered at major studios, should be more reliable. Now seeing the other party throw over such an exhaustively detailed document, he vaguely felt like he was being micromanaged. He even began doubting whether joining this studio where he couldn't even meet the boss face-to-face was the right decision. Adam frowned but didn't respond, simply gesturing for everyone to quiet down. Then, as the most experienced programmer, he began reading aloud from the document's opening section. However, his very first paragraph left everyone stunned. Regarding all core content for Rescue Team of Time's first playthrough, including the main story progression, all dungeon level structures and monster distributions, the complete numerical system for moves and items, and even Pokémon recruitment conditions and evolution methods, I have completed the final draft myself. What you all need to do is strictly follow this blueprint and use your technical expertise to perfectly implement these designs. Only in the game's second playthrough or subsequent updates may you freely develop content based on your understanding of the game. Please understand. The room fell silent. One person independently completing all core design for a game of this scale? How was that workload even possible? The dissatisfaction on Lin's face was instantly replaced by disbelief, his mouth hanging slightly open. He was already seriously doubting whether this guy was bluffing or had some fundamental misunderstanding about the complexity of game development. No matter how you looked at it, this wasn't something one person could accomplish alone, right? Was he seriously making claims this outrageous? He began to think his choice might really have been a mistake. However, as Adam continued reading, everyone's expressions gradually shifted from doubt to shock, and finally to complete A. The document went on to elaborate on specific optimization directions in detail. First, regarding map design, it was no longer just simple random generation but proposed the concept of themed dungeon clusters. For example, surrounding the starting village should be lower difficulty gentle dungeons like Wigglytuff Guild Forest and Sandshrew Cave. As the story progressed, more challenging and visually impactful areas would appear, like Dark Forest, Stormy Seas, and Lava Mountains. Each dungeon cluster had unique trap mechanisms, weather effects, and exclusive wild Pokémon populations. Some even concealed secret passages to special dungeons, with interconnections between them. Next came the move and item system, which was even more absurd. When Adam read approximately 1,472 moves currently planned for the system, covering commonly used moves of all types plus some special variants, with each move having independent power, accuracy, PP values, type, range of effect, single target, straight line, room, entire field, and special effect descriptions, as detailed in the appendix. Everyone sucked in a sharp breath. This wasn't just a design draft anymore, was it? This was a straight-up encyclopedia. The items section listed over 200 items, from basic potions and berries to mystery crystals that temporarily changed terrain properties, to friend bracelets that summoned temporary allies. Each had detailed usage effects and acquisition methods. The document emphasized that these values had been rigorously calculated to ensure balance across early, mid, and late game. Based on their experience, it genuinely seemed accurate. Next came the section on character designs and dialogue. The document clearly stated, all Pokémon character portraits, pixel animations, dynamic dungeon behaviors, as well as all story dialogue, quest text, and entertaining Pokémon interactions need not concern you. This studio possesses a unique super AI system capable of automatically generating high-quality, stylistically consistent visual resources and naturally flowing text content. You need only leave the corresponding interfaces and resource slots. One bombshell after another left this group of former Dream Factory elites dumbfounded. Whatever slight sense of superiority they'd had from working at a major studio was now completely gone. Even Dream Factory couldn't pull off this kind of technology. Each item hit them like hammer blows. The document seemed to be nearing its end. Adam scrolled his mouse, preparing to read the final summary. However, his finger suddenly stopped, his shoulders jerking sharply. "What's wrong, Adam?" Lynn couldn't help asking. The others also cast puzzled looks. Adam didn't speak. He simply slowly turned the laptop screen around, showing everyone the last few lines. Those lines, written in a calm tone, read, "Pokémon Mystery Dungeon, Rescue Team of Time, upon official completion, will adopt a completely free release strategy, charging players no fees whatsoever, with no in-app purchases, purely as a gift to all Pokémon fans." Hey? Free? Lynn's voice cracked. Adam stared at the screen as if confirming he hadn't misread. The others exchanged glances, faces full of absurdity and disbelief. Such massive content, such meticulous design, plus that super AI they'd never even heard of, and it was free? Someone murmured in a low voice. Comparing this approach to Dream Factory, forget it, there's no comparison. Yeah, there's really no basis for comparison. At that moment, an unprecedented surge of motivation quietly spread through the small room. Let's do this. Meanwhile, Cynthia exhaled softly, dispelling the tension from her battle with Sydney. The end of Victory Road lay before her. She guided her character through the final stretch of dim corridor. The view opened up to reveal a simply furnished hall with a trophy-shaped save point glowing faintly at its center. She approached and saved, restoring all her Pokémon's HP to optimal condition. Consecutively challenging the 4 Elite Four members, especially the last one, Ghost-type specialist Phoebe, had consumed tremendous mental energy. The coordination between that Drifblim and Mismagius was unpredictably tricky. She'd nearly capsized several times. After adjusting the moves and held items for Swampert, Sceptile, Rotom, Wobbuffet, Pelipper, and Ludicolo, she looked toward the door at the far end of the hall, carved with a Pokeball pattern. Beyond that door lay Hoen's Champion Hall. According to the game's background, Steven should be waiting for her. Cynthia couldn't help feeling somewhat nostalgic. That guy was an old acquaintance in the real world too. They'd even sparred a few times before. She wondered what Steven's performance would be like in the game. With that thought, she pushed open the door. The magnificent hall interior was well lit, with sacred and grand BGM playing. However, the figure standing at the hall's center with their back to her was not the well-dressed, light blue-haired Steven she'd expected. It was a female silhouette in a black coat with long golden hair, her posture upright and familiar. When that person slowly turned around, Cynthia's pupils contracted sharply, her fingers unconsciously tightening around her gaming device. Because that face was unmistakably her own. A bit earlier, in the villa in Cerulean City, Kairos sat at his computer, the Emerald Game Editor interface displayed on screen. He was setting up the final battle before completing the first playthrough, the champion battle. According to the original game, the champion at this point should be Wallace. For players who'd already collected all 8 badges with fully formed teams, the challenge level was basically non-existent. As such, Kairos felt this ending was a bit bland, lacking a climax that would leave even top-tier players with a lasting impression. His gaze fell on a faintly glowing icon in the system panel. Special Intermediate Module, Mirror Match Module. Special Intermediate Module, Mirror Match Module. Module Effect: when loaded into a game created by the host, the game can generate a perfect mirror or enhanced mirror opponent matching the player's actual skill level or in-game level based on that player's real or virtual capabilities. This is the ultimate self-challenge. Module Mechanics. Host may select Replication Target, player's in-game strength/player's real-world strength. Replication Mirror: advanced AI will 100% replicate the player's current team, items, move configurations, and common tactical habits. Defeating this mirror requires the player to break through mental patterns or deliver exceptional performance. Enhanced Mirror: Super AI will use the player's team with IVs and EVs optimized to theoretical limits by the system. AI decision-making will be faster and more precise than the player. Counter Mirror: Super AI will specifically use a perfectly counter-built team against the player's strongest team/core tactics. The player must temporarily change teams or develop entirely new tactics with their current roster. Point Generation Rules: when players are crushed and experience frustration and unwillingness, they'll provide certain emotion points. When they finally find a method to defeat the mirror, they generate large amounts of positive emotion points. Specific output determined by actual mirror difficulty. Additional notes: the module deeply analyzes players' real or virtual battle records to construct highly realistic mirrors. Backend records player versus mirror win rate changes and performance to intuitively reflect their progress. Recommended that host reward players in-game or in reality when they first achieve victory against any mirror opponent, generating joy and accomplishment to catalyze emotion point generation. That's right, he'd used this module to enable the champion challenge. Players would face a shadow with identical strength to their own for battle, with this mirror mimicking the player's current in-game team strength. As the game progressed, when players challenged the champion again in the second playthrough, they'd face their real-world team in enhanced mirror form. Thinking about this, Kairos felt some anticipation. He wondered what reaction and expression the first person would have when entering the champion room and discovering the champion was an exact copy of themselves. That scene should be pretty interesting, right? At that moment, inside the champion hall, Cynthia was completely stunned. She stared at the on-screen champion whose avatar was identical to her own character, momentarily forgetting to even operate. Until the opposing mirror Cynthia took the initiative and sent out her first Pokémon, Ludicolo. Battle instantly commenced. However, the subsequent developments subjected Cynthia to unprecedented pressure. The opposing self commanded with an extremely sharp style, as if completely seeing through her thoughts. Just as she was about to have Swampert use bulk up to boost stats, the opponent's Ludicolo preemptively used Fake Out to interrupt her setup. When she calculated using Rotom's multi-type advantage to launch an offense, the opponent's Wobbuffet would enter at just the right moment, disrupting her offensive rhythm. They were clearly the exact same 6 Pokémon: Swampert, Sceptile, Rotom, Wobbuffet, Pelipper, Ludicolo. Yet the opponent seemed able to bring out these Pokémon's synergy to its absolute limit. Every move choice, every rotation and defensive switch was terrifyingly precise. Even she, a champion, was being suppressed. Attempt after attempt, Cynthia tried various openings and tactics but could never break through the mirror's impenetrable defense. The opponent was like a cold mirror, clearly reflecting back all the hesitation in her tactics, habitual patterns, and subtle flaws, then exploiting them. Just like that, Cynthia lost battle after battle as nearly 3 hours slipped away. As yet another defeat arrived, Cynthia felt every cell in her body trembling. This feeling of battling a perfect self wasn't discouraging at all. Instead, it made her incredibly excited. This experience was absolutely amazing. Again. Another defeat came. Facing the black screen, Cynthia took a deep breath and began focusing intently on analyzing the reason for this loss. The mirror seemed to have a clear grasp of her rotation patterns, especially skilled at predicting when she'd send out Polyper to activate rain weather. In that case, try using that against it instead. Let's go again. Chapter 222 The Final Champion Battle, Advanced Module Unlocked. A few minutes later, the screen in front of Cynthia went dark once again. The word defeat materialized before her eyes. Her fingers rested on the mouse, her breathing slightly labored, but deep within those pale golden eyes, excitement burned. Even though she'd lost again. This time, the failure didn't bring confusion. She could clearly feel it, that mirror image, that perfect reflection of herself, wasn't invincible. Its precise predictions and cold calculations seemed to be built entirely on a flawless simulation of her known habits. So the key to breaking through was she had to surpass herself. As she operated the controls, a new battle began. Cynthia sent out Swampert. The figure of Ludicolo appeared once more on the mirror's side of the field, its leisurely posture now radiating overwhelming pressure when faced head-on. According to the script that had repeated countless times, according to the most reliable choice for her as a champion-level trainer, she should switch to Polyper right now, using type advantage to avoid the attack while setting up for rain tactics. And this mirror image had surely anticipated this move, waiting with a precise counter. Over the past few hours, she'd fallen into this logical trap countless times. This time, Cynthia's gaze locked onto the icon in Swampert's move list that represented Rock-type Power Rock Slide. A wild idea surfaced in her mind: don't switch. Have Swampert use Rock Slide right here. Her fingertip hovered above the button, and time seemed to stretch. Cynthia took a deep breath and threw away all her calculations, all her caution, all the tactical inertia that belonged to her past. She stopped thinking about anything else and, following pure instinct surging through her mind, forcefully pressed the Rock Slide command. The instant the command was issued, a light effect representing a Pokémon switch indeed lit up around the mirror character. It had predicted this. It thought she would switch to Polyper. The light faded, and what appeared before Swampert was none other than the mirror team's Polyper. However, this Polyper that had just entered the field, prepared to counter water-type attacks, was met not with the expected torrent but with massive boulders carrying destructive force from Swampert. Boom! Rock Slide! Enormous rocks crashed down like meteors. The super-effective notification flashed brilliantly. The mirror's Polyper didn't even have time to cry out. Its HP bar was completely depleted in an instant, its eyes immediately showing the spiral pattern that signified being knocked out, and it collapsed heavily to the ground. It worked. Cynthia's spirits soared. That single strike had completely torn through the mirror's iron defense. Without hesitation, she seized this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and continued her assault. Next came Sceptle's leaf blade slicing through the air. Rotom's flamethrower pierced through the battle space, brilliant flames landing a precise critical hit on the opponent's Rotom, while Wobbuffet's mirror coat returned Sceptle's attack with double the force. The mirror's defensive coordination was thoroughly disrupted, and its once precise predictions suddenly became sluggish. Finally, as Cynthia's Ludicolo unleashed an energy ball condensed with surging grass-type energy, instantly knocking out the mirror's last Swampert, the triumphant victory music finally echoed throughout the Champions Hall. The darkness of defeat didn't descend. Instead, brilliant golden radiance and the massive word victory appeared. On the screen, that shadow identical to her began to fade. Before completely disappearing, it looked at Cynthia, and smiled. It was like an acknowledgement, and also like encouragement. Then, its figure dispersed like sand blown by the wind, vanishing into the hall's light. The next moment, soothing and solemn music began to flow, as if golden sunlight was streaming through the hall's dome. In the center of the hall, Cynthia's champion photo was solemnly engraved on the wall of honor. In the photo, her in-game form stood confidently and resolutely, surrounded by the partners who had fought alongside her all the way to the top. The steadfast and composed Swampert, the nimble and swift Sceptle, the mysterious and versatile Rotom, the reliable counter Wobbuffet, the weather-controlling Polyper, and the energetic Ludicolo. Every Pokémon's eyes radiated warmth, frozen together in this moment that belonged to their peak. Cynthia gazed at this photo, an indescribable satisfaction and weighty sense of accomplishment flooding her heart. Is it over? The next moment, melodious and gentle music suddenly replaced the triumphant victory BGM. The scene shifted, and a CG animation began to play. The view was open, the sky crystal clear, with endless grasslands below. This was the very grassland from the start of the game. Cynthia's in-game character was riding that familiar red bicycle, traveling across the grassland. Wind blew through her character's hair and clothes, wheels rolling as the scenery along the way began to flash continuously. The Puchayan as she first encountered on Route 101 poked its head curiously from the grass. In the dim light of Petalburg woods, Wurmple slowly crawled between leaves, Silcone hung quietly from branches. The scene shifted to the rugged rocks outside Rustboro City Gym. By the seaside of Dewford Town, white waves gently lapped at the beach. Familiar figures began appearing on either side of her vision. Pokémon she'd merely encountered during her journey all appeared. Taillow crossed the sky leaving a shadow. Zigzagoon watched alertly by tree roots at the roadside, stealing an Oron berry. Loaded floated leisurely in a sunlit puddle, blowing bubbles. Then the scene kept flashing, one difficult battle after another appearing. The first challenge against her rival, the first gym battle. The first glimpse of a legendary Pokémon, the first encounter with Team Rocket. From a rookie trainer just leaving town to becoming champion, now she'd experienced countless things along this journey. The scenes continued flashing, the battle of the 3 legendary birds, the chaos at the power plant, every event rapidly replayed. And beside Cynthia, the figures of Ludicolo, Sceptile, and other original partners began to appear, from their initial forms, gradually evolving. As time passed, Rotom and Pelipper joined in as well. They seemed to transcend the boundaries of data, truly accompanying her, racing forward together against the wind. This wasn't just a replay of a journey, but a condensed representation of the bonds she'd formed, the growth she'd shared with this virtual world and these Pokémon. Cynthia watched the screen quietly, the flowing light reflected in her pale golden eyes, and a gentle, contented smile quietly graced her lips. The hardships of battles along the way, the surprises of unexpected discoveries, the confusion and enlightenment she'd experienced, all of it now transformed into warmth in her heart. She remembered that she'd initially come only for clues about Rayquaza, but looking back now, this journey filled with challenges and discoveries had already gained a preciousness that surpassed the final goal itself. Everything along the way to becoming champion in the game, the companionship of partners, the trust of Pokémon, the joy of defeating powerful opponents. Her fingers unconsciously traced the cool surface of the Pokeball belonging to Garchomp on the table. "I'm so glad I met all of you." At that moment, the game scene ended. A prominent system notification popped up. "Congratulations player Strawberry Ice Cream on completing the first playthrough. You have earned the League Champion title." Immediately after, a familiar gift box appeared directly before Cynthia. This was the game's reward. A series of messages began to appear. Intermediate Rare Candy Gift Box X3, miraculous candies containing pure life energy that can instantly stimulate a Pokémon's potential, greatly enhancing their strength. Trademark, Dragon Dance, Garchomp exclusive optimized version, a bone scroll emanating ancient dragon majesty, inscribed with arcane patterns, custom designed for Garchomp's powerful body and dragon-type energy core, enabling it to unleash even more terrifying combat power when dancing. Cynthia froze completely. This reward was just as outrageous as before. Garchomp normally couldn't learn Dragon Dance, she'd tried before but ultimately given up. But this thing could make Garchomp do exactly that? She reached out to retrieve the trademark, but then another notification appeared on a small, delicate device. It was a compact, intricately designed device resembling a miniature radar, its surface flowing with a faint cyan glow. Special custom item, Sky Vault Detector. Upon activation, will attempt to detect and lock onto the coordinates where Rayquaza may currently exist in the real world. Energy is limited, please use with caution. At that moment, her body jolted violently. As if an invisible thunderbolt had struck through her. The goal she'd pursued her entire life, that legendary figure soaring above the ozone layer, hailed as the sky god, its whereabouts in the real world. Cynthia felt her heartbeat stop for an instant, then begin pounding wildly. Her fingers unconsciously tightened, nearly crushing the box. The rewards from the game were absolutely genuine. Which meant this thing could actually discover Rayquaza's whereabouts. The next moment, she suddenly reached out and pressed the button on top of the compact detector, activating it. Dash. At the same moment Cynthia conquered the Champions Hall, a notification popped up on the system panel before Kairos. Detected that player Cynthia has successfully defeated Self-Mirror Image, completing the Special Champion Challenge module for the first time. And becoming the first player to clear it. You have received Special Achievement Reward, Emotion Points plus 5,000. You have received emotion points from Cynthia and 3800. Watching the number in his account instantly jump from over 10,000 to nearly 60,000 points, Kairos was momentarily stunned. Cynthia's that intense? She cleared it already? But... awesome! The mirror self-design as the final boss was clearly excellent, bringing in so many points all at once. This module was practically a gold mine. Truly worthy of being a special module. Kairos muttered to himself internally. It seemed he really could use this module to set up challenges in different games, even in Emerald's second playthrough. However, the reason for so many points this time was largely because Cynthia's emotional threshold was already quite high, so the points gained from her would be doubled. Well then, since he now had 60,000 emotion points. Holding this fortune, Kairos didn't hesitate. He decisively opened the system shop and clicked on the advanced module section that had previously been locked with a grey chain icon. System, unlock. With a thought, he confirmed payment of 50,000 points, which instantly vanished. Immediately after, accompanied by a crisp, pleasant system sound effect, all the icons in the advanced module section lit up. Another notification popped up. Congratulations host, you have successfully unlocked the advanced module section. The next moment, the chain icon disappeared, replaced by a dazzling ocean of icons overflowing with brilliant light. Advanced module, Pokémon Nature Impact Deep Simulation Module, price, 50,000 points. Advanced module, Ecological Environment Dynamic Evolution Engine, price, 75,000 points. Advanced module, Legendary Pokémon Event Chain Generator Module, price, 100,000 points. Advanced module, Reality Link, Individual Values and Effort Values Visualization and Guidance System Module, price, 60,000 points. Advanced module, Pokémon Behavior Interaction Expansion Pack, price, 55,000 points. Each module's name and brief description below were incredibly tempting, making Kairos feel satisfied just looking at them. He knew these modules' capabilities, any one of them could greatly enrich the game's depth, realism, and playability, bringing massive returns in emotion points. But these prices, weren't they a bit too expensive? Each one started at 50,000 points. No wonder the system required 50,000 points just to unlock this advanced section, otherwise, you couldn't afford anything once inside. Just as he was pondering, a notification appeared. Congratulations host, you have received the unlocking bonus special advanced module X1. Kairos raised an eyebrow. That generous? There's even a freebie? The next moment, a module icon glowing with deep purple light spun down into his inventory. Special advanced module, Regional Forms, Concept Expansion Pack. Description. Basic effect, after using this module, the games you create will automatically generate numerous random terrains and ecological environment zones. Additionally, the game's worldview and ecological environment will undergo unlimited extension and automatic expansion, with the probability of introducing entirely new appearances and regional form Pokémon content. Seeing this notification, Kairos paused slightly. Just the basic effect alone had such complex content? Truly worthy of being advanced. He contentedly prepared to exit the shop interface and examine this module's specific effects in detail. His finger habitually swiped down on the virtual screen, and the page began scrolling. There were many types of advanced modules, several pages worth that couldn't be viewed completely, conservatively estimated at over 1,000. Just as the page was about to reach the very bottom, its speed slowing to a near stop, an extremely faint rainbow glow suddenly pierced into his vision. Kairos's finger froze in midair. Wait, what's that? Chapter 223, The Million Point Special Module, Another Connection with Mutuo? In the most inconspicuous corner of the interface, a module with no text description, no icon preview, and no price tag lay quietly waiting. Kairos instinctively clicked on it with his mind. A notification popped up. Notice, unlocking this special module requires 1 million emotion points. What? Kairos sucked in a sharp breath, his eyes locked on that notification. He was completely stunned. 1 million emotion points. His brain felt like it was short-circuiting. He'd just unlocked the entire advanced module section for 50,000 points, which already felt like a fortune. What kind of module could possibly justify a cost this astronomical? Could it create legendary Pokémon from scratch? Or maybe digitize the entire world and load it into a game? People can be contrary sometimes. If something's priced at 50,000, Kairos might complain it's too expensive. But price something at $1 million? Now he absolutely had to know what justified such an outrageous cost. He was genuinely curious, but still, that point requirement was terrifying. Kairos glanced helplessly at his pitiful point balance. After unlocking the advanced section, he had barely over 10,000 left. That wasn't even a fraction of what he'd need for that rainbow module, let alone the cheapest items in the advanced section. Forget it. He shook his head, temporarily suppressing his intense curiosity about the rainbow module. No point dwelling on it now. Better to focus on completing missions, releasing new games, and earning more points. At least his point accumulation rate was steadily increasing. At this pace, he'd eventually scrape together $1 million. He redirected his attention to the special reward module the system had given him for unlocking the advanced section. He'd gotten distracted by the rainbow module earlier and hadn't examined it properly. Special Advanced Module, Regional Forms Conceptual Expansion Pack. Description as follows. Base effect: after using this module, games you create will automatically generate vast amounts of random terrain and ecological environment zones. Additionally, the game's world building and ecological environments will undergo unlimited expansion and automatic development, with the chance to introduce entirely new appearances and regional form Pokémon content. Advanced effects. 1. Terrain Blueprint Library. Input ecological environment keywords, such as volcano/rainforest/magnetic levitation city, to automatically generate several differentiated 3D terrain proposals. 2. Ecosystem Calculator. If game design leans toward natural wilderness, after setting base Pokémon species, automatically generates the region's complete food chain, type advantage chain/habitat distribution/day-night behavior logic. 3. Terrain Scan and Copy. Use this module to scan all regions of your current world, understand all terrain and special zones belonging to that world, automatically generate game content to copy into games, or view as a map. 4. Emotion points earned from games using content generated by this module are multiplied by 2. Additionally, after accumulating 100,000 emotion points through this bonus, you can unlock this module's next special effect. Current additional emotion points earned, 0. After reading through the module's description, Kairos's eyes couldn't help but light up. This really was a special advanced module. The effects were genuinely impressive. The base effect alone was essentially a super map generator plus a Pokémon form expansion pack, saving massive amounts of manual work designing world backgrounds and ecosystems. The Terrain Blueprint Library and Ecosystem Calculator simplified the fundamental logic of game design even further. It was practically a godsend for for efficient developers. But what satisfied him most was actually the third effect, Terrain Scan and Copy. Scan the current world's terrain and automatically generate game content or maps. Didn't this mean that no matter which world he traveled to using the story transit scroll, he could instantly obtain a perfect map of that world? This function would be incredibly convenient whether he used it to create Pokémon games based on real worlds, or simply to view a world's layout, terrain, and locate special sites. As for game applications, Kairos immediately thought of the upcoming Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Time. This type of game, with dungeon exploration and randomized terrain as core gameplay, desperately needed powerful map generation and ecological diversity, didn't it? This module couldn't have come at a better time. Now he just had to wait for the programmers and game developers at Dream Factory to send over their refined version. When that happened, he could immediately integrate this module. Just as Kairos was contemplating this, the system notification chimed again. Ding! Host has received a new special mission. S-rank mission, Traffic. Top-tier traffic. Have one of your games attract 1 million non-trainer players. Mission reward, emotion points plus 20,000, SS rank special Pokémon item blueprint X1, special system advanced item box X1. Kairos glanced at the new mission requirements and paused. 1 million non-trainer players? He stroked his chin thoughtfully. For traditional games centered on becoming a trainer, challenging the league, and encountering various Pokémon like Emerald and Dark Phantom, this would indeed be challenging. Although the games themselves were groundbreaking, the core player base they attracted was undoubtedly people who already aspired to the trainer lifestyle or were already trainers. Ordinary citizens, researchers, Nurse Joys and Officer Jennies might play too, but reaching the million-player threshold would be genuinely difficult. But what about Pokémon Mystery Dungeon? What was the core concept of this series? Players became Pokémon themselves. Pokémon forming rescue teams. It had absolutely nothing to do with human trainers, capturing, or battling. The game objectives were exploring dungeons, rescuing Pokémon in distress, solving various problems, making new friends. This gameplay and theme naturally broke free from the trainer identity restriction. An ordinary citizen might have little interest in commanding Pokémon battles, but wouldn't they enjoy playing as an adorable Pikachu or Bulbasaur, adventuring through dungeons and helping other Pokémon? Wouldn't a researcher studying Pokémon ecology be interested in exploring unknown dungeon ecosystems? So Explorers of Time absolutely had the potential to spread Pokémon's appeal beyond trainer circles. With this realization, Kairos immediately grabbed his communicator and dialed the number of the person who'd handled Emerald's promotion. Emerald was currently at peak popularity, and Dark Phantom was performing well too. This was the perfect time to promote a new release. He needed to arrange Mystery Dungeon's marketing quickly and put down a deposit. Hello? Is this you? I remember you. I have this number saved. The phone was answered almost instantly. An excited voice, nearly cracking from enthusiasm, came through. Background noise suggested the person was somewhere busy. It's me. I'm calling about the deposit for promoting the new game, Explorers of Time. Kairos had barely started when the other person cut him off. Promotion? No problem. Absolutely no problem. Sir, you can count on me. I'll handle this perfectly, even better than last time, trust me. The voice was filled with barely contained excitement, the words tumbling out rapidly. Deposit? No, no, no. Please don't mention money. Being able to promote your games again is an honor for our company. I'm begging you, please let me handle this. Don't call anyone else. His reaction was completely different from the professional, almost skeptical attitude he'd had when they first discussed Emerald's promotion. It was like dealing with a totally different person. Kairos paused, then understood. When they'd promoted Emerald, the guy probably just thought Kairos was some ambitious client with interesting ideas, taking on the project with a let's see what happens attitude. Now Emerald had exploded across the entire Pokémon world. As the earliest and largest promotional partner, this person and his team had undoubtedly made a name for themselves and earned a fortune. Even the league officials had probably contacted them, asking about this mysterious game and its creator. So when Kairos personally reached out to promote a new game, this wasn't just business anymore. It was a massive opportunity and an honor. No wonder he didn't even want payment. He was terrified Kairos might go with someone else. All right, I'll leave it in your hands, Kairos agreed readily without fuss. I'll send you the materials shortly. Remember, this time the target demographic needs to cover non-trainer groups as much as possible. I want as many people as possible to see this game. Understood. Mission accepted. Just wait and see. The guy practically beat his chest in assurance, his enthusiasm nearly bursting through the phone. After hanging up, Kairos felt satisfied. The promotional side was temporarily handled. Now he just had to wait for the finished Mystery Dungeon product, A&D. Check on how Mewtwo was doing. Thinking of Mewtwo, Kairos felt a stirring. Since that intense mental clash at the Rock-type gym, he hadn't successfully used the invitation card to check on Mewtwo's situation. He wondered how Mewtwo was doing now. With a trace of curiosity and subtle concern, Kairos activated the invitation card again. He'd actually tried many times before, but every attempt had failed, so he'd given up. But this time, the invitation card successfully activated. That meant Mewtwo was playing the game. His consciousness connected to the virtual screen once more. The image brightened. Mewtwo's game character stood in the dimly lit depths of a rocky cave. His figure seemed to carry a barely perceptible weariness compared to before. Not physical, but more like a mental state. The confusion that had seemingly eased after the rock gym battle now appeared to have returned, seemingly even deepened. Clearly, Mewtwo had undergone some Team Rocket training during this time. Maybe special training, maybe research. Kairos wasn't clear what exactly, but it definitely wasn't anything good. Seeing Mewtwo like this, he even wanted to ask about his condition, what he'd been through recently. But he could only hold back. Right now, he was playing the role of system assistant, a cold guide, not a close friend. Proactively asking about a player's emotional state, that definitely wasn't something a game system would do. To maintain Mewtwo's trust, he could only continue observing silently. At that moment, Mewtwo seemed to snap out of some deep thought. He operated his character, his gaze sweeping over the partners in his Pokeballs, Water-type Marshtomp, evolved from Mudcup, and Beedrill. That look was complex, carrying scrutiny and a trace of confusion. Finally, he did nothing, simply withdrawing his gaze and continuing to control his character deeper into the cavern. What followed slightly surprised Kairos. Mewtwo's command and judgment abilities had clearly jumped another level compared to the Rock Gym period. His movement routes remained efficiently precise, but his battle choices were more flexible and varied. His use of type advantages and move effects grew increasingly sophisticated. The trainers he encountered in the cavern, whether using rock types or other types, stood virtually no chance against Marshtomp's water-type moves and Beedrill's Poison Sting and Fury Cutter attacks. Battles ended quickly. He swept through effortlessly, soon completing the entire Granite Cave storyline, defeating the final trainer and reaching the cavern's deepest level. Like most other trainers, he was drawn by the faint, mysterious aura emanating from the cave's depths, controlling his character toward that open area. Then he encountered it. A cutscene began playing. A massive, ancient body constructed of solid rock radiated an ageless, heavy pressure. Through gaps in the stone, ruby-like light faintly glowed, the sleeping rock titan, Regirock. Mewtwo's game character looked minuscule before it. But Mewtwo himself, behind the screen, his purple eyes suddenly sharpened with intensity. He didn't immediately choose to battle or flee. Kairos could sense an invisible, powerful psychic force seemingly penetrating everything, assessing this legendary existence. A moment later, Mewtwo's thought carried a certain confidence. Energy assessment, structural analysis, threat level determination. Conclusion: target possesses strength, but weak. Weak? Kairos watched this scene and couldn't help shrugging. Well, that was fair. Although Mewtwo had just been born and his power might not be fully awakened, as the pinnacle achievement of genetic engineering, a legendary Pokémon with nearly infinite potential, a titan like Regirock really couldn't compare. That said, even through a game, Mewtwo could sense and judge Regirock's strength. His psychic power was truly formidable. In the game, after finding that Regirock remained motionless, Mewtwo's character took one last look at the sleeping titan before turning and leaving the cavern. His objective was clear: proceed to the next gym location, Dewford Town. Dewford Gym, a fighting-type gym. The gym leader was Brawly, a fighting-type specialist. The trainers inside the gym used exclusively fighting-type Pokémon, Machop, Makuhita, Meditite. Drill's Bug/Poison typing gave it 1/4 times resistance to fighting-type moves. Those trainers' fighting-type attacks barely scratched Beedrill. Meanwhile, Drill's Poison Sting and Wing attacks dealt massive damage. Mewtwo cleared these NPCs even more easily than in Granite Cave. Beedrill practically steamrolled through all the gym's preliminary challengers with overwhelming force. Soon, Mewtwo stood before gym leader Brawly. Chapter 224 Mirror Mewtwo, the perfect plan. Before long, Mewtwo stood face to face with gym leader Brawly. Hey! A new face! Welcome to the fighting dojo! Brawly grinned broadly. Let me test your strength with the passion of combat. Go, Combusken! The battle began. Brawly's lead Pokémon was none other than Combusken. Without hesitation, Mewtwo sent out Beedrill again. In his logic, a Pokémon with quadruple resistance to fighting-type moves was the optimal choice. Combusken, wing attack! Brawly's command caught Mewtwo off guard. Combusken leaped powerfully into the air, its wings glowing white as it slashed toward the airborne Beedrill with a sharp whoosh. A flying-type move. Super effective. Caught completely unprepared, Beedrill took the hit hard. Its HP bar plummeted drastically, dropping straight into the dangerous red zone. Meanwhile, Mewtwo's counterattack with Poison Sting dealt far less damage than expected when it hit Combusken. The opponent's physical defense seemed quite impressive. Mewtwo's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. This damage, something's wrong. Combusken's attack power seemed higher than anticipated, while Beedrill's offense felt strangely weak. It seemed he'd misjudged the opponent's Pokémon typing. This wasn't purely a fighting type. Not only that, but a notification popped up as the turn ended. Combusken's speed boost ability activated. Its speed rose. Combusken, Ember. Brawly didn't give Mewtwo much time to think. Combusken's speed had noticeably increased, letting it strike first again. Flames shot forth in another super effective hit. Drill's HP bar emptied completely as it collapsed with spirals in its eyes. Beedrill fainted. Mewtwo's expression remained unchanged as he immediately chose to restart the battle. Since Beedrill had a type disadvantage, he'd send out Marshtomp to counter this opponent instead. Soon the battle restarted, this time with Marshtomp taking the field. After that first encounter, Mewtwo had determined the opponent's typing likely included flying and fire. Water Gun. Combusken, Swords Dance. Rather than attacking, Brawly had Combusken spin in place, its body glowing with red light signifying a major attack boost. Mewtwo's brow furrowed slightly, seemingly puzzled by this behavior. The next moment, Marshtomp attacked. A thick jet of water burst forth, super effective. Combusken's HP dropped to less than a quarter. But at the same time, Swords Dance completed, raising Combusken's attack by 2 stages. And as the new turn began, Speed Boost triggered again, making it even faster. Yet Mewtwo still found the opponent's actions incomprehensible. Even with boosted attack, given Marshtomp's bulk, this seemed pointless since the opponent couldn't survive another hit anyway. As the new turn began, he had Marshtomp use Water Gun again. Now, Combusken, Baton Pass. Brawly revealed a victorious smile. A handprint-shaped mark appeared on Combusken's body as it transformed into red light and returned to its Pokeball. Immediately after, a muscular Gurdurr carrying an enormous steel beam materialized on the field. The moment it appeared, red light swirled around it, the boost from Combusken's Baton Pass transferring over, attack up 2 stages. Speed up 1 stage. This move could transfer a Pokémon's stat boosts. Mewtwo immediately understood Brawly's strategy: lead with the speedy Combusken, use its speed advantage to set up boosts while stacking speed boost, then use Baton Pass at low HP to transfer those boosts to the next Pokémon for sweeping. Marshtomp's Water Gun hit Gurdurr, but the damage only took about a third of its HP. Clearly this was a tank with high endurance. Things had come to this point, so he chose to restart once more. Gurdurr, Hammer Arm! Brawly shouted with fierce momentum. The terrifyingly boosted Gurdurr was quite fast, attacking first as its massive steel beam came crashing down on Marshtomp with tremendous force. Marshtomp's HP bar plummeted like an avalanche, getting instantly KO'd. With this level of offensive power and speed boost, Mewtwo's remaining Pokémon couldn't withstand the boosted Gurdurr either. Beedrill fell to a single fire punch, his team swept effortlessly. You lost to Gym Leader Brawly. Kairos watched the defeat message pop up on screen and shook his head slightly. Brawly's speed boost, Swords Dance, Baton Pass combo was basically a nightmare for new trainers in the early game. Many players had gotten stuck at this gym for a long time, trying various methods like using high-damage Pokémon to KO Combusken before it finished setting up. But the Focus Sash prevented players from easily accomplishing that. He wondered how long it would take the super-intelligent Mewtwo to find the solution. As it turned out, Mewtwo's response once again surprised Kairos. He didn't react like typical players by panicking or immediately restarting, and he didn't even go level grinding. After exiting the battle, he went straight to Marshtomp's move list, his gaze rapidly scanning several moves: Water Gun, Growl, Mud Slap, Endure. His eyes paused for less than half a second on Sand Attack in the reserve move slot before unhesitatingly replacing Growl with it. After completing this, he walked toward Brawly expressionlessly and initiated a second challenge. Kairos instantly understood his thinking. He planned to disrupt the target receiving those boosts during the turn Combusken used Baton Pass, namely Gurdurr. Sand Attack lowered accuracy. If Gurdurr got unlucky and missed its first attack, it would get hit with Sand Attack again. This was actually a simple strategy, quite common among game players. But Mewtwo had never encountered this type of game before, yet he could instantly think of this approach. Mewtwo really was as sharp as ever. The battle began again. Mewtwo repeated his previous setup, leading with Marshtomp while Brawly predictably had Combusken use Swords Dance again. When the second turn started, Mewtwo didn't have Marshtomp attack but decisively commanded, Sand Attack. Marshtomp raised its claws, kicking up sand from the ground and flinging it straight at the opponent. Combusken transformed into red light just in time, and Gurdurr appeared again bearing 2 attack stages and 1 speed stage worth of boosts, looking intimidating. But the moment it emerged, it got a face full of flying sand, a grey accuracy-lowering effect glowing around it. Gurdurr's accuracy fell. A new turn began. Gurdurr, Hammer Arm! Brawly roared. Sand Attack! Mewtwo's command came faster. Just as Gerdur raised its steel beam, the game notification popped up. Gerdur used hammer arm, but it missed. The next instant, it took another face full of sand from Marsh Tomp. Its accuracy dropped again. Watching this, Kairos couldn't help but feel impressed. Sure enough, in such a short time, Mewtwo had not only seen through Brawly's core relay boost strategy but also pinpointed the most effective countermeasure, using sand attack to lower the accuracy of the key sweeper, Gerdur. Once Gerdur couldn't land its hits, even the strongest attack power meant nothing. What happened next confirmed Kairos's assessment. Mewtwo had Marsh Tomp continuously use sand attack while seizing opportunities to chip away at Gerdur's HP with water gun. Gerdur's attacks repeatedly missed. After its accuracy dropped 4 stages, the hit rate of hammer arm became pitiful. Though it did land one hit during this process, Marsh Tomp somehow managed to survive thanks to damage variance. Finally, after Gerdur missed with hammer arm yet again, Marsh Tomp's torrent boosted water gun successfully finished it off. As for Brawly's remaining 2 Pokémon, they were quickly dealt with by the well-prepared Beedrill. 2 minutes later. Congratulations! You defeated Gym Leader Brawly. Obtained the Knuckle Badge. Triumphant victory music played. Brawly walked over, laughing heartily as he handed over the Knuckle Badge and trademark bulk up. Beautiful battle. Very clever tactics too. Your Pokémon really trust you. You've earned this reward. However, Mewtwo simply accepted the badge and trademark silently, his face showing no joy of victory whatsoever. He didn't even glance down at the badge symbolizing his win, nor did he celebrate with his Marsh Tomp and Beedrill like normal trainers would. He simply put them away, then controlled his character to turn around and walk straight out of the gym, heading toward the next town. His departing figure looked particularly odd. Kairos watched the silent, advancing figure on screen, his brow furrowing slightly. Something's wrong. Clearly, Mewtwo's current state was very off. Although his tactical abilities were improving and his battles were becoming more efficient, that sense of inner confusion seemed even deeper than after the Rust Burrow gym. Now Mewtwo was like a precise, cold machine executing a program. Victory itself seemed unable to evoke any emotion in him. The way he looked at his Pokémon, while no longer purely viewing them as tools like at the start, still carried that complex sense of distance. Kairos could feel that during this period, the brutal training and testing from Team Rocket, along with whatever ideology they'd instilled in him, hung like heavy shackles. Even in this game world that could bring new understanding, it continued to deeply influence him. Something was affecting Mewtwo's heart. He seemed to be contemplating heavier questions, his mind completely absent from enjoying the game's journey or his companion's company. This wouldn't do. He had to find a way to guide Mewtwo and help him untangle this knot in his heart. But how should he guide him? He couldn't just directly chat with him, right? That definitely wouldn't work and would violate his current role. Arrange a suitable plot event? Given the current situation, ordinary NPC storylines probably couldn't resolve Mewtwo's state. Just then, Kairos's gaze fell on a module icon in the system backend that he'd used before, one glowing with an eerie light, Mirror Challenge module. An idea flashed through his mind like lightning. Of course. Fight fire with fire. Let Mewtwo convince himself. This mirror module's power wasn't just in copying a player's battle data. Its core ability was perfectly replicating the player's entire existence. And right now, Mewtwo was his player. He could use this module in the game to create a data-constructed mirror Mewtwo possessing all of Mewtwo's current thought patterns, cognitive logic, and even his confusion and doubts. Let Mewtwo face himself directly. Let him find the answer he's seeking through dialogue and interaction with himself. This thought immediately excited Kairos. Wasn't this idea pure genius? Time to act. He immediately closed the window monitoring Mewtwo's gameplay and fully immersed himself in the system backend. He pulled up the invitation card, opened the game development backend software, and directly selected the Mirror Challenge module with his thoughts, activating it and locking onto the target player Mewtwo. Mirror module activating. Target player identity confirmed, Mewtwo. Beginning deep scan of player's mental signature. Reading player's current cognitive model. Extracting player's deep thinking logic. Analyzing player's emotional fluctuation spectrum. Data modeling in progress. Constructing mirror core. Generating mirror Mewtwo. Warning, high-intensity mental barrier and external interference source detected in target player, mirror generation depth limited. Activating deep penetration scan, consuming additional 1000 emotion points, penetration successful. Mirror core construction complete. Mirror Mutuo generation complete. Insert Mirror Mutuo into specific plot node in player Mutuo's current game progression. Insert. Kairos directly confirmed. As for the location, how about the seaside in Slateport City, where he was about to arrive? The trigger condition, when he's alone facing the ocean, this mirror would activate. Command confirmed. Mirror Mutuo successfully inserted into game world, coordinates, Slateport City coastline, specific plot point, dot. Trigger condition set, player Mutuo's character reaches coordinate point while in non-combat, non-mandatory dialogue, solitary state. Watching the confirmation message appear on screen, Kairos let out a long breath and leaned back in his chair. On the backend interface, the model representing Mirror Mutuo slowly rotated, emanating an aura nearly identical to the original along with a cold yet deeply confused purple glow. Now that Mutuo's mirror was complete, Kairos knew that simply having two versions of Mutuo in his current state talk wouldn't solve anything. He needed to make some changes to the in-game Mirror Mutuo. That way, their exchange would be meaningful and produce a positive effect on Mutuo. His gaze returned to the monitoring screen. Mutuo's game character was riding Old Man Brinny's boat, slowly heading toward the coastal city of Slateport. He'd arrive soon. In that case, he needed to pick up the pace too. Kairos took a deep breath and immediately got to work. Chapter 225, 226, The Mirror's Effect, Mystery Dungeon Stunning Release. Kairos worked at a breakneck pace, fine-tuning and arranging Mutuo's mirror encounter. Finally, just moments before Mutuo reached Slateport City, he completed the setup. At that exact moment, Mutuo's game character stepped onto the busy docks of Slateport. In the holographic display of the invitation card, the dock scene rendered in stunning detail. The massive Whalmer fountain sent up clouds of mist. Cargo ships bellowed their horns. Tourists chattered excitedly. Yet all this vibrant noise only made his sense of isolation worse. Instinctively, he avoided the crowds and walked alone toward the quiet beach at the city's edge. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting both sky and sea in matching shades of red and purple. The ocean breeze stirred gently as waves lapped against the sand with a soft, rhythmic sound. This peace only made the confusion churning inside Mutuo's heart feel sharper. He guided his character to stop beside a rocky outcrop, facing the endless ocean, apparently lost in thought. Just then, a semi-transparent system notification quietly appeared. Special atmospheric conditions detected. Resonance level increasing. Hidden story event triggered. Something was coming. Mutuo's guard shot up instantly, his psychic energy snapping taut. In the game screen, the air before his character began to ripple, light and shadow twisting together. A figure materialized silently, its back turned to him, also facing the sea. The instant he recognized that figure, Mutuo froze completely. That was himself? This thing looked exactly like him. Mutuo's psychic power reached out instinctively. There was no collision or resistance, only a sensation eerily similar to his own, yet somehow even purer in its cold detachment. This wasn't another version of himself. It was more like another mirror. The mirror image slowly turned around. Its face showed no expression, yet its hollow eyes seemed capable of piercing through everything, staring straight into the depths of Mutuo's soul. A glacial thought drove into Mutuo's mind like an icicle. What are you looking for? Power? Proof that you matter? Or, the reason you exist? You keep thinking that training your marsh tomp and beat rill, earning badges, beating opponents, how is any of this really different from what those people made you do? It's just another routine they programmed into you. You hate being controlled, yet you've locked yourself in a cage made of efficiency. Haven't you become a controller yourself, in a way? Each word struck at Mutuo's most vulnerable spots. Cold rage mixed with the humiliation of being seen through so completely. Mutuo seemed to force himself to stay calm as he replied icily, power is everything. They're tools, a means to an end. This has nothing to do with control. This is simple logic. The mirror image's lips curved into a mocking smile, and a cold laugh rang out. Logic? You dismiss emotional bonds as meaningless, yet you can't explain why gym leader Brawly smiled at his Pokémon after losing, calling them his partners. Can your logic make sense of that inefficient connection? Brawly's cheerful grin flashed through his mind, along with those words, your Pokémon really trust you, don't they? More images surfaced before Mutwo's eyes, Marsh Tomp's pure, trusting gaze in the glow of evolution, Beedrill believing in him even on the verge of fainting at Rustboro Gym, enduring that final hit, the wordless understanding between Old Man Hatchie and his wing owl. A strange sensation rippled through Mutwo's core. No. This shouldn't be happening. The thoughts they'd drilled into him surged through his mind. You're just a weapon. Weapons don't need feelings. Emotions are weaknesses. Self-denial crashed violently against this new realization, bringing Mutwo a level of inner chaos he'd never experienced before. You look down on human emotions as weaknesses, the mirror image's voice suddenly sharpened, but you don't even have the guts to face your own confusion. You're afraid to admit that those meaningless interactions have shaken something inside you. What scares you so much? Scared to admit you're not perfect? Scared to admit that you actually want connection with other living beings? Shut up! Mutwo's psychic power exploded in a furious roar. At the same time, in Team Rocket's underground laboratory, the cultivation tank's instrument panels erupted in flashing red lights, accompanied by shrill alarms. Purple light blazed around Mutwo's entire body as the culture fluid churned violently around him. In the game, he thrust out his hand, an invisible psychic shockwave blasting toward the mirror image. But the light effect passed straight through the phantom and vanished without a trace. The mirror image stood completely unmoved, smiling again. Look. The power you talk about. Completely meaningless. You can't even beat yourself. Before the words finished, the mirror image transformed into pure psychic energy and surged into his consciousness. In that instant, countless agonizing fragments came flooding into Mutwo's vision. The sensation of cold metal restraints digging into his body. The tearing pain after energy overload. The emotionless commands over the intercom. And those figures in white coats, looking at him as if he were nothing more than a weapon. NGH. In reality, Mutwo curled up in pain inside the cultivation tank. In the game screen, his character collapsed to his knees on the beach, hands clutching his head. The mirror image had already faded, leaving only one final statement behind. Think carefully. If you refuse to be their weapon, then what do you want to be? Host alert, invitation card player Mutwo psychic connection forcibly disconnected due to severe fluctuations. Warning, psychic fluctuation level exceeds safety threshold. Emotion points calculated, 600, source, confusion/pain/anger. Kairos stared at the system notifications, his expression complicated. Honestly, the mirror image's performance had exceeded his expectations. He'd originally intended to use it to make Mutwo confront his confusion, but he hadn't expected the mirror to tear open Mutwo's wounds so viciously, pushing him to the breaking point. Still, from the looks of it, he'd gotten the effect he wanted, hadn't he? What came next depended on whether Mutwo could find his own answers. He could only hope the big guy would pull through soon. Kairos shook his head slightly and closed the invitation card function. Who knew when his next connection with Mutwo would be? At 9 p.m., while working on Emerald's second playthrough content and the expanded maps for Dark Phantom, Kairos suddenly received an email from Adam's team. The email contained the initial playable build of Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Time. Though still rough in Kairos's opinion, the framework was solid. And honestly, for what he needed, that was more than enough. He immediately activated the system modules to enhance the graphics, generate the opening cutscene, and set up the character AI logic. Then he opened the Regional Forms Concept Expansion Pack and selected Activate. In the next moment, an invisible scanning wave swept across Hoen's mountains and rivers, touching the borders of Kanto and Johto. MT Chimney's magma, Petalburg hidden groves, MT Pyre's mist, all of it was precisely captured and converted into blueprints for game ecosystem zones. The engine hummed as it calculated ecological chains based on the data. Heat-resistant slugma and Numel inhabited lava caverns. The foggy cemetery became a haven for ghost and psychic types, following nocturnal patterns. Something incredible happened. Random algorithms kicked in, and certain Pokémon forms began to subtly shift. First, a Marowak, influenced by Hoen's ancient tomb environment, its bones turning pale white, wreathed in ghostly blue flames. Its bone club lengthened considerably, its typing stabilizing as ghost/rock. This guy actually looked pretty cool. Maybe rename it Cemetery Form Marowak? Kairos raised an eyebrow. Next, Kanto's Grimer appeared to have been contaminated by Hoen's industrial waste zones in the simulation. It became thick and pitch black, its surface gleaming with metallic oil slicks, transforming into a hard-shelled Grimer with poison/steel typing. Holy crap, poison/steel? Kairos glanced at it and immediately saved this absolutely broken type combination. After that, under Kairos's modifications, the dungeon complexity began to skyrocket. Sandstorms raged through desert mazes. Heavy rains flooded forest floors. Dense fog obscured player vision. In fire-type dungeons, lava started flowing and rockfall traps multiplied. Hidden passages required specific type moves to open, flames melting ice barriers, water streams washing away sludge. Players could even encounter legendary Pokémon apparitions that needed rescuing deep within dungeons. Massive amounts of data, terrain, ecosystems, Pokémon, items, quest text, were all precisely integrated by Kairos into the program framework. He also fixed numerous bugs and optimized performance. Not only that, after brief consideration, Kairos enhanced the experience of playing as a Pokémon. He added vivid physical gestures like Pikachu nuzzling faces to show affection, Bulbasaur using vines to pull up fallen teammates. He enriched voice options and designed numerous charming partner interaction animations. The final step was adding a simple local rescue record leaderboard and sharing functionality. After finishing everything, Kairos suddenly realized dawn was already breaking. Exhaustion washed over him. After one final check to confirm the game was bug-free, he clicked the publish button and went straight to bed. Once he woke up, he'd see how the release was received. 2 hours later, Yancy's stream came online. Her energetic face appeared against a background packed with Pokémon Plus highs. She looked like she'd rushed to start streaming, barely styled at all, yet her eyes sparkled with unusual brightness. As she went live, floods of fans poured in, and the chat immediately came alive. Good afternoon, Yancy. Hey? Isn't today your day off? I remember your announcement said you were resting today. Surprise stream. What happened? Yancy looked at the chat and grinned. Good afternoon, everyone. Yep, today was supposed to be a lazy rest day, but... She drew out the word. I got some absolutely mind-blowing news. Couldn't keep it to myself. So I had to hop on right away. Chat curiosity exploded. What news? New merch dropping. Could it be that thing? The rumor going around. Yancy nodded vigorously, clapping excitedly. Nope, neither. It's that Wind Workshop that made the masterpiece Emerald. They just released a new game. Dropping any minute now. I think it's called Mystery Dungeon or something. Chat instantly exploded. Holy crap. For real. Wind is back already. How long has it even been? Is this a Dark Phantom sequel? Or an expansion? Take my money. How much this time? My wallet's ready. If Wind made it, it's gotta be gold. Let's go. The official trailer just dropped. First time seeing it myself. Let's watch together. Yancy excitedly clicked her mouse and switched screens. The stream began playing the promotional video for Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Time. Pale lightning tore through storm clouds. Savage waves swallowed a lone boat like some massive beast. A tiny human silhouette on the bow was tossed up and down, completely helpless. Yancy gasped. Whoa, this opening. So intense. Is someone in trouble? Chat started flooding. Damn, this art style. Cinematic quality. When Wind works, it's always different. Money burning on screen. This ocean scene is incredible. I'm so immersed. Just then, a burst of pure, brilliant light tore through the darkness, accompanied by deep, resonant sound effects that swept across the entire screen. As the light faded, the camera focused on a fluffy, somewhat confused orange paw. The perspective slowly pulled back, revealing a Charmander lying on a white sandy beach. Waves lapped gently. Sunlight streamed down. A calm, magnetic narration voice began, when you wake, the world has changed. This is a wondrous world. And you, have become a Pokémon. Yancy felt completely stunned. Wait, what? Become a Pokémon? She'd imagined many possibilities for this studio's new game, but becoming a Pokémon? How could anyone have guessed that? At the same time, chat absolutely lost it. This studio really never does anything conventional. I'm dead. The protagonist turned into a Charmander, what the hell? Bulbasaur fan here, not happy. Why not Bulbasaur? Wait, so if you're a Pokémon now, what's the main storyline? Beat up trainers. Curious +1. As everyone discussed, the footage began rapidly cutting between scenes. The Charmander protagonist faced a pile of damp firewood, awkwardly puffing out its cheeks and poof, releasing a small orange flame that successfully lit a campfire. Warm light pushed back the surrounding darkness. A Pikachu wearing a scarf approached, smiling warmly at the Charmander. A Bulbasaur nervously backed away in a dark, damp cave, vines slightly raised. Before it rolled Geodude closing in and Zubat hanging silently from the ceiling, spreading their wings. A massive overhead map appeared, showing a Squirtle carefully moving through it. The grid spaces contained grass patches, rocks, and unknown shadows. Yancy spoke rapidly, excitement clear. Look. That's the core gameplay. This is an exploration game. Lighting fires, encountering wild Pokémon. No wonder they went with pixel art again, it really fits this style. But, the game's called Mystery Dungeon something, what's the connection to rescue? I don't see it. Many in chat posted similar questions. But just then, a help letter marked SOS fluttered down in the wind, landing before the protagonist Charmander and that Pikachu.
Additionally, if you would like to request novels and access my Google Drive where I have 200+ audiobooks, then you can join my Patreon. Link is also provided in the description.